0.
Right.
Okay,
Else is freaked out.
figured it out. Teamwork, everyone.
Yay.
All right.
I did my part, I stayed out of it.
All right, everyone, it is 3:07, and for those listening later, sorry for the delay. We had a Zoom technicality, but we are ready to go now. So we'll officially call this board meeting to order. We'll do a roll call, and at work sessions, we'll go all the way around the table, so everybody gets a chance to say who they are. I'll start, and we'll just have this way. Carly Hoover, executive pronouns, I'm the director of District 1.
Troy Simpson, District 3.
Kate Fuller, District 2.
Hello, Aaron Degana, begin pronouns, HR, labor relations spec.
Dr. Jessica Proctor, Director of K-12 Education and College Readiness, she, her pronouns.
Andrew Mon, Director of Student Services and Special Education, she, her pronouns.
Haley Derslag, she, her pronouns, 8th grade ELA teacher at Showalter.
Suzanne Rieger, she, her pronouns, region specialist at Showalter Middle School.
I'm Brett Christopher, principal at Showalter. He had pronouns.
Oh, Scott Whitbeck, Chief of Academics and Schools, he, him pronouns. Dave Larson, School Board Director, District 5, he, him.
Constance Pedrosa, Dr. Constance Pedrosa, Superintendent of Tickle School District.
Thank you, everyone. I just have to say, I love all of your sticky notes, just ready to go. Okay, just a quick tech note. We are trying a new system that we have on loan with the hope to be able to upgrade from those owls that we've been using that we know make it really hard to hear and see all of the different things and the different folks that are engaging in the board meeting. And so we need your input, if particularly as you're listening to the recording or joining us later. If there are things that maybe come up, we'd love to hear if like you're having trouble hearing or seeing things. And if that does come up, please email Deb Clore. That way she can get that information and we can make sure that we can work with our tech folks, our IT folks to be able to troubleshoot those as we decide if this is a good upgrade that we should move forward with. Yeah, you're welcome. Welcome to all of our guests joining us in person and in the future online. So we'll move to approve today's agenda.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. And we'll start. I'm really excited to hear from the Showalter team about your school improvement. So take it away.
You can jump to the next slide. Thank you. There you go. All right, so we just want to start today to essentially kind of talking a little bit about proficiency and growth. The bottom line is like when people look at scores, especially like on the OSPI report card or in the Seattle Times, they're always looking at proficiency. And I mean, and that's important, right? Because we believe our students are going to get to standard. But what we recognize is that given a lot of the circumstances that exist in our district, kids are going to reach that point at different times. And so for us, the big thing to really focus on is growth. And we've kind of started that work when we started like looking at the iReady annual typical growth and the stretch growth, that type of a measure. And years past, we had a student growth percentile data back before the pandemic, which we were able to look at, that really was a telling factor for us to be able to kind of look at our students growing and then how that worked. And essentially, it was giving us the ability to look at if I took the SBA in math as a 6th grader and scored a certain score, then as a 7th grader, it was going to compare my 7th grade score to everybody in the state who had the same score in 6th grade and see how much I grew compared to my peers. And so I had a math teacher that I was working with years ago when it first came out, talked about it, like the no excuse data. Right? Because as a math teacher, those were my kids, they were with me. And so it's good to be able to look at that. Also, when the state's looking at our school improvement status, the WISIP score, they use that proficiency and growth, and actually growth gets a little heavier weight in the measure. So it's really important to think about are our kids growing? And iRate is gonna measure, one thing, and SBC is gonna measure math also, but then it's also reading and writing, when you're looking for that score, so.
I just want to add to that, because I completely agree. I've been preaching on this for years, and the one thing I understand about proficiency is virtually directly correlated with income. If I have a presentation, I give it a lot of time, and you can count, it's just, just tell me your Regis lunch rate, I'll tell you what your, as a district is gonna be. And so, whereas I actually spent some time this weekend looking at the SGP, the growth data, and that's completely uncorrelated with income and ELL status. So it's a much more fair, and that's really, as school districts, that's what we're in the business of doing, is growing students. And so proficiency is what it is, and, but growth is, I completely agree, that's what we should be focusing on.
Yeah, and when you think about also who's taking the tests,
Right.
if I'm a newcomer and I've been here less than a year, I don't do the literacy side, but I have to do the math. And so that's gonna impact that proficiency score. Because those kids, many of them their level of English is not gonna be at a point where they're really able to access all the information in that test, right? So, so the score, this one, the scores from last year, there we go. And really what we wanted to highlight today was the growth that we saw around 8th grade in language arts. And when you look at that score, the median scores used for the state is usually right around 50%. That makes sense, right, for the median growth.
That's exactly 50% by definition.
By definition. And so when you have 62, the growth percentile is at 62, that's bordering on high growth for that group. And of course, that's what we want to be able to see. And so what we wanted to kind of do is like give you a view into the work we were doing last year around language arts at 8th grade, and how we're going to, the work that's going to we're carrying forward to the whole department, actually to the other contents as well. So.
And by the way, I looked up, where we stand relative to the state, and that number, that 62 number, it puts us in the top 12% of all 8th grades in the state. That's how good that number is. And so, 50 is kind of the standard to the state, but any numbers, the other number that's 7th grade math is over 50. Anytime we get numbers over 50, that's really good. If we get numbers in the 60s, that's very, very good. About the highest you'll see is typically maybe in the 70s for that larger group of students. So anyway, that's a outstanding number. So I'm really interested to hear, what's going on that makes that number what it is.
All right, go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll let Ms. Hamilton jump in on
Is it
that.
okay if I stand?
Please.
I cannot sit down.
You'll get it.
So thank you for having us. We're really excited to take you on a journey today of what's been happening in language arts instruction and how that trickled down to grade level and how we are leveraging all of the best practices that are impacting scholar growth and what we're doing with our entire building to keep growing our scholars. So what you're looking at right now is a text that we used as a base. We sat down and we thought about, this isn't about little pockets of PD or one size fits all. We have a coach, we have release time, we have June time, we have August time to collaborate. We need something to launch from. So that was a text that we studied as an English language arts department. Those 4 stars there are some really important elements that we also looked at. How do we go from being an ELA department to a high leverage professional learning community where we have this cyclical work of looking at student work, of looking at data, trying something, implementing something in the classroom and bringing it back and monitoring the effectiveness of that. we had this amazing literacy coach, her name was Suzanne Rieger, just kidding. So we really leveraged my time with teachers that were whole department to grade level. And when I say for these days, that was me facilitating work with one teacher, two teachers, really focusing on our co-teaching or collaboration partnership at the eighth grade with Ms. Derslag, and our special education teacher to make sure that students had access to grade level standards, access to grade appropriate text. So Ms. Derslag and I spent quite a bit of time together, which then launched into her becoming the department leader, where we spent once a week lunchtime together to really dig into her leadership and how we could think outside the box and reinvent how this department worked together to impact student learning and do it in really innovative and creative ways, but use a framework like universal design for learning as the glue that holds all the work together. So Ms. Fawcett, best practices, professional development. To Brett too, we started looking at how we use our staff time as well, and having a through line in our staff time and sending things in emails. So when we know we have limited time, and we hear that very often. So when we're together as a staff, we're together as a team, we are focused on instruction and what is best for our scholars and really collaborating versus doing some laundry list type things. So last year, Ms. Derslag led the department and we started rethinking what that 1 hour monthly together as an English language arts department looks like. I'm gonna toss it over to her to share some highlights of that.
Thank you, speaker. Hi, everybody. I'm gonna stay seated. But let's talk about ELA department meetings. In language arts this year, I really wanted to formulate, like Sue said, our hour into something high leverage. So going from that, here's our laundry list of what we need to just make sure everybody knows. We went to, let's bring student work. Let's evaluate where all our students are at, because this is our reality. Some are at level 1, some are at level 4. This is our big array of what we're working with every day. Let's bring student work. Let's figure out where kids are, and let's figure out how to lift them all up 1 or more levels. That's always our goal. So in August, we decided to take this universal design for learning framework and pick out 1 lens per month. In September, we were looking at writing about reading. We were looking at how can kids take what they're reading and react to it. We then figured out what is one activity that we can streamline through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. How can we collect that data and then bring it back to our next meeting and figure out, cool, we have L1s. What's our step to lift them to 2 next month? We have L4s. How can we lift them beyond what is their benchmark? How can we keep lifting our kids based on what they're showing us with that data? And that was just an amazing way to spend our October meeting. All of our teachers brought back samples of student work. We got to talk about where kids are and how they're being successful, how they can be lifted that 1 or more levels. And that continued into that framework for the rest of hopefully this year, but also we would add on another framework. So it is getting more and more crowded, of course, about what we're going to be focusing on, but it's getting to a level of, I'm confident in looking for students writing about reading. Now let's add on speaking and listening. Now let's add on the next piece of our framework. So as we get more comfortable looking at our student data, we're able to track another part of that framework. And I really appreciate my team members because they have been super active in this way of leading meetings. And I do think part of like what Sue said, it's not, hey, let's talk about iReady scores, and then let's talk about what we're going to put on our SIP goal. A lot of that we're doing across chats, we're doing across emails, and it is a very efficient way to run meetings when we are actively talking about what we're implementing into our next lessons. So to summarize, student work and evaluating that student work and planning based on that student work has been a really effective use of our time. And I hope that that is pushed out to the rest of our departments. Oh, and I know we're getting to learning walks, but in a way, I hope that our learning walks could even be learning from other department meetings. because I would like to see how other departments are running their meetings. Great. Thank you.
So you're probably wondering, that's lovely, ELA is the whole staff doing this. We are on our way. So this, we wanted to highlight. I feel like I have the point, sorry, everyone.
Just don't touch the board.
I won't have it, I'm saying this part. So here is a tool, we're really proud of, that was created by our leadership team at Showalter Middle School, and that team is made up of representation from all content areas. We looked at, if we're gonna implement UDL practices, what would be the most high leverage, tool or way to monitor that? Because we all know there's lots of great things that come along and we wanna do the next best thing, so we'd be like, yeah, we're UDLing. But what does that mean to really see it in the classroom? So some of us have, I call us historians, Brett. We've been here and we've been through some best practices that are high leverage and for whatever reason may have gone away. So we started having, discourse around what if we monitored, we need to use our iReady data, as a piece of it, but what if we use learning blocks? We got the whole staff into each other's classrooms, across content, deprioritizing practice, taking some risk, trying stuff on, because we kind of fall short at implementation level. So let's do it and get into each other's classes, and again, we'll leverage our staff time to really look at what are we seeing, and to be very clear, we designed this, and less was more in the beginning, we landed on collaboration and community and flexible M&Ms, we're calling it. Methods and materials. So two things we're looking for when we go into classrooms, a 7 to 8 minute snapshot. We train the entire staff on how to use the tool for calibration and consistency of our data. And over here is just an example of a schedule. So we walk, we get 2 substitutes in our building, and we all engage in learning walks, 6 periods a day. This is the learning walk team, it can be 3, 4, there's always an administrator, a specialist facilitating that dialogue, because that's the power of these learning walks. We collect some data and we write on here, but it's in that discourse afterwards. And I do want to say, as someone who's heavily involved in that, we have had some really, really powerful conversations and discourse around instruction. But we have something to hang it on now, right? We have that UDL framework. So something that's really exciting is their common language when we're talking about instruction, right? We're super focused on instruction and impacting our scholar learning in the building. So again, this is an example. Mr. Christopher makes sure that we have consistency and not just content we're visiting when we visit it, and then we turn this into a it's Google form, one person reports, and we look at this either on an early release time or at a staff meeting time. So you're probably wondering, did you do anything with the data that you collected? Well, the answer would be, next slide, please. Yes, so this is an example of, we were looking for flexible methods and materials. And one thing we're always really racking our brain about is the idea of striving readers in our building, not MLL, not scholars with IEPs, but just that population of striving readers, what used to be called struggling, but we do not use that term. They're striving, growth mindset. So how do we help all students access text? We are working super hard to build this community of literacy at Showalter. So how do we help a striving reader who is in 8th grade? And we have some data that says they are missing some foundational reading skills, meaning phonemic awareness, the sound system, or phonics. So how do we help them access text? So this is just one example of work that came out of some of the UDL work that we are doing. And I'm just going to talk about this and give it back to Haley, and we're very excited about this. This slide here represents Haley created this into a book bingo, but we've been leaning into and teaching in 8th grade, particularly eighth grade boys who are sometimes resistant to reading because they understand where they're at, or it's just, it's a social, there can be a social stigma to that. So in partnership with Ms. Black, the librarian, myself, the collaboration teachers, we looked at all the different ways, and the beauty of this is the communities here too, it's KCLS involved in this too. So how do we help students access read to me books on Epic? How can they check out, I think it's like 30 audiobooks from KCLS? How do we help them get their library account to do that? How do we tap into nonfiction books, graphic novels? So we are really, really working on, again, this idea of flexible materials, because we want all scholars reading and really leaning into that. Listening to an audiobook is reading. Having the read to me feature is reading, and it really personalizes it, and it's inclusive of all readers. With that being said, I'm gonna pop back to Haley for the other side of that.
Thank you. If y'all look at the left side, that is a draft menu. Choose an option of how you're gonna write. And I got this menu from Miss Tran, who was our other eighth grade language arts teacher. And on that learning walk, she was leading a whole lesson on autobiographies. And I thought, wow, that is a great map. That is showing us flexible methods for the kid who wants to write on binder paper, for the kid who wants to use a Google Doc and do speech to text. Thought that was an amazing example of flexible methods. I took that idea back to my classroom, and just like Sue said, I thought that's a great way to be flexible with reading. And that book bingo was born out of what Ms. Tran had for the different ways to write, that draft menu. And they look similar because, yeah, it's borrowing what a teacher has already made, work smarter, not harder, as we always say. And that template was just a springboard for me to implement that into a new area of ELA. And we haven't done the book bingo yet in class. We're gonna start that about 2 weeks, but I'm really excited for it because making it a bingo, making it and everybody is doing this means half the class is in audiobooks today. That doesn't mean that it is just this amount of kids who's in audiobooks. It's everybody if you want it. Everyone gets to try Epic. Everybody gets to try graphic novel. So it does take the stigma away from this method of reading is just for this group of kids. It lets everybody get out of their day-to-day book, try something new, get a little stamp as a reward, and then also that larger reward of, hey, I found something I liked. It's also normalized now, hopefully, and I can continue knowing what I like and then continue reading in that area. So I have high hopes for it.
And we are trying to connect that to real world, so we all read differently. Like, I won't hold the device to read, I still wanna hold the book. So we make that connection for lifelong reading, that adults are accessing books in very different ways. And one thing I do wanna say, and I don't have like a data point to back this up, just that I lived there every day last year, the increase in circulation at the library is from 2 to 3 years ago to now. I mean, our circulation, kids are just on it, checking out books. I mean, we just keep growing this culture of reading, and we all read. We just have to dig a little deeper sometimes to, tap into some of the resistant, striving readers, sometimes. And Ms. Durzak and I have done a lot of work around like leaning into skill instruction, but also leaning into habit instruction. We've unpacked quite a bit together over the last few years. And for some scholars, it's skills. For some scholars, it's skills and habits. And for some scholars, it's just habits. So we talk about things like volume and stamina, which are more habits. They have the skills to read. So we've worked very closely with students on identifying like their reader identity too, and really knowing who they are as a reader. Yeah.
Last thing about this, for our eighth graders, we're sending them up to foster next year. And they are expected to be much more independent once they get up to ninth grade. If they know I work best typing, if they know I work best with an audiobook and a physical book at the same time, that's something we hope to send with them, that they know how they learn best so that they can independently make those choices without some of our, here, try this and try this and try this. They know when they get up there, I read best this way, write best this way, and I can get started because I'm confident in my methods of learning.
Just have to say, as digging into some of this SGB data even more and comparing the growth number, remembering that, 50 is the middle and so forth, broken down by race. And before, like African Americans, before it was 26, and now it's 52. I mean, massive jump. Two or more races was before 25, now it's 60. And so, I mean, which makes a lot of sense when you talk about flexible methods, you start starting to appear to allow different students to access the information in different ways, and it's showing.
I think there's so many beautiful things, right, about this approach that you're talking about. You start talking a little bit about like erasing the stigma around one particular way of doing things. I was a really, really, really slow reader as a young person, and so then I just didn't do it because I felt so, like everybody so around me could like speed through a book, right? And so, and then that brought a lot of like shame and like guilt even about my own ability to learn, right? So this idea of allowing young people to like tap into the method that is going to support them as learners is just really amazing. Also, there's like so much evidence about the power of choice, right? And a young person get an opportunity to say for themselves, yep, this is how I want to engage in this learning. This is how I want to do this thing. And I think oftentimes in systems like these, we get so caught up in the rigid of like, this is the one way. So this is just really, really incredible work. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you too. Brett and I talked about starting implementing right away some of the DL work in the school last year and the book studies and all of that. So it's really nice to see that you've taken all of that learning and have built out all of those components in those areas. So it's really nice to see. And then also the success you've had with it as well. So one idea sparked another idea, sparking another idea, and all that collaboration. So nice work so far. It's been great. Yeah.
And there's so much SEL like growth, right? And connection to all of that.
You can't really section.
No.
So quick question on choices, can they do more than one? So I'm an adult person who loves to have books read to me, so I'm an Audible person, but I also have Kindle. So I'm reading Kindles, I think is important to keep your cognitive visual skills going, and it actually helps you keep on pace. I'm not really a big fiction person, but I'm in a book group, so I have to keep up with them. So I use both. If it's nonfiction, I don't do the Audible, I just read because I just separate nonfiction. Do you have students doing similar things where they're mixing and matching? Yeah. Okay, it's powerful if you can find the right door. Yeah.
Yeah, I think where we see that is, we have a lot of fiction readers, a lot of graphic novel readers. I see, a lot of students opt for like an epic for, nonfiction, text, and that Read to Me feature does a nice job at highlighting text features, like understanding how to use those. But I think two things to that, we want to expose students to ways to access text, and we are always striving to give them access and experience across genres as well. Fiction, nonfiction, all the genres within fiction. We talk about everybody has a favorite, but we do a lot of trips to the library, a lot of, book tasting, like, did you know about dystopian? Just to, because sometimes they don't have choice, right? When they are advancing in their academic career. So we're gonna switch gears because you're probably wondering, what else are you doing with the whole building? Show off there. Okay, let's talk about the sick.
Just one thing, the other thing that I think is really powerful about this is, I infer that you're not really doing interventions, you're not pulling out students to go somewhere else. It's inclusive, and what I've seen over the years, whenever we do coaching like this and group work, much better results.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that's really
Yeah,
powerful about
it's much less. We still have some.
Yeah,
But it's more focused at that early production level.
right.
And the bulk of that instruction's happening in the core.
Right.
Yeah, so Director Larson, we have 2 courses currently that really focus on, just that foundational reading, like learning the code. And those scholars still have a language arts class, but the rest of my day is still working with teachers, working with students in class. So everyone has the same experience and access to that grade level, instruction. So we are all about common languages here. So we're talking about the SIP and we're all owning the SIP. The SIP is not Brett and Mr. Christopher and Ms. Perez made this. And this document that keeps coming up. So we want everyone involved in how we're gonna meet those SIP goals. And again, everyone in the building has a responsibility to work towards those goals. So through our OSSI grant, we have developed a system, again, leading into those high leverage practices of collaboration. We know that works. Time to collaborate, we know that works for our teachers at Showalter. And we want to get better at how we look at data. We do a great job at looking at it as a whole building. How do we drill down now to content, grade level, and the really cool thing about this is actually partnership level. So what you're looking at is just one slice of our release schedule that we are using our OSSI grant money to release teachers for a half a day, facilitated by Mr. Christopher, Ms. Perez, or myself with data protocols to really dig into data. What data, depending which team we're working with, but that can be bigger picture, benchmark data, iReady, student work, CBAs, all the above, really working to triangulate data and see what story is being told. So really excited about this work. We launched it today. Thank you, Ms. Perez. Today math team, it's awesome. But we just wanted you to see that we have math, ELA, science, math. So we have prioritized math once a month and then rotation between ELA, science, and ethnic studies is in there too. So very excited, but I put collaboration on here because inside of this, who is released like ELA, Derslag and Ramos, that's our special education teacher with our general education teacher really working collaboratively on those data cycles. Same thing with math. And then we have co-teaching partnerships and MLL teacher with a general education teacher. So those are prioritized in this schedule as well. And this goes all the way through June. So we will definitely keep you updated on how that's going, what that work looks like. But we want to have rich, effective data dialogue in our building based on whatever data we have and what's happening with student work that we're doing in ELA. We want that in all departments. So this is our big framework for how we're going to adjust for SIP.
So you said the word co-teaching, so how is that, I mean, how many, is that something that's done in a lot of classrooms, some classrooms?
Yeah.
Sometimes?
Do you want to answer?
Yeah, so what we've done is there's 2 levels, right? There's the students who are on APs and then students that are MLL, right? And so students that are on IEPs, for example, Ms. Ramos, she's got a couple LRC1 classes. The other 3 periods of the day, she co-teaches a section, she co-teaches with Haley, that sort of thing. And then on the MLL side, our ML coaches, one, because we have so many newcomers right now, we have more sections of newcomer classes than we had in the past. But what we did differently this year was we put each ML coach and paired them with a content area teacher. So for example, Ms. Stradley co-teaches with Ms. Hooley a 6th grade section of ELA. And it's about half the students are ML students. And they're co-teaching that class We've got another section at ethnic studies at grade 7 and a science at grade 8. And really the focus is to get that ML coach to help build the toolbox and skills of that teacher to teach all ML students across the day by co-teaching that one period. And then next year, I'm gonna move that coach to the other science teacher at another grade level and do the same thing so that we build our capacity from within. And for this year, when we're doing this work, if Sue and I are working together to co-teach, we're prioritizing this work with them to strengthen their work together.
The reason I asked co-teaching is because the one school that blows away the SVPs every year is Rainier Prep, which has co-teaching in every single facet. And of course, we've talked about the money aspect of that. They do that because they pay the teachers out. But anyway, the point is, yeah, and so the fact that we're doing, yes, using co-teaching to the extent we can do it economically, and it makes a lot of sense what you're describing.
Yeah,
So
we're
that's
trying
good.
to maximize
Yeah,
it. And
sure.
matter of fact, the other piece of the master schedule is giving them all common planning,
Yeah.
right? So it's while they're co-teaching one period, they're planning together the other period. And that was tricky in building master schedule to do it across, like all the MLL coaching opportunities and the special ed collaboration models. But we were able to make that work this year. So, because really, I mean, for collaboration to happen in the classroom, you have to be able to provide that time. So
Right.
that had to be priority when we were building master schedule. Just had to, as far as who got planning, what period and all that kind of stuff. It had to.
So now you're kind of like, what does it look like for our scholars? So, Ms. Dursline is gonna take you through a couple of, student tools and experiences, how this has, played out and been implemented in the ELA classroom.
Thank you. Okay, this has my whole heart. This is something that ELA likes to call level check-ins, and we developed this last year. And, I'm so excited to talk about it. So, sparring with students or communicating teacher to student with the goal of growth. When we do level check-ins, the goal is growth, and the vehicle here is pausing and lifting for students. During a formative or summative assessment, there will be these pause days where I will chat with each student, say, hey, where are you at? Some kids at L1, our top level is level 4, some kids are at L4, some kids in the middle. But that is advocation. They know where they are. Awesome. And then what we do is we teach small groups. All my L1s coming over, I want to reteach you something. All my L2s come see me, we're gonna practice something about where you are, and so on. Even the L4s, you have completed everything I've asked you, and guess what? There's still another level that you can get to, because we are always growing, we are always continuing to strengthen where we are. So growth mindset shows up here, advocating for where a student is shows up, reflecting on how they can be lifting themselves that one level, maybe even 2 levels in a day is there, and revising, adding to their work and understanding where they are and why they're doing those revisions or why they are adding to their work is also there. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is a rubric that I would just like to show y'all before I show you how a level check-in day would go. But all kids are given this rubric at the start of a formative or summative assessment. And I know it's small up there, but in each of these bullet points, there is I did this language, such as I know what book I'm using. I started one section or less, but that still is a positive thing. They've still done something. After that, it's I can level up by choosing my next section to add to. Even if a student is at level 1, they've done something and they get to do something next. They are still active in this project. The point of this rubric is to shy away from, I'm at a 1, I'm done. There's no way I can catch up. We really don't want to give students that idea, because we have a day left. We have 5 days left. There's still time to, as we say, level up. So in each of these 4 bars, there's room for a student to say, I am somewhere and I can move. Even again, with those level 4s, there's something that celebrates where they are, and there's still an additional place for them to show that they are growing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So on these pause and lift days, pause days, usually during independent reading, or maybe it's during iReady, I will do a quick 20-second conference with each student. I'll say, okay, we're working on our one-pager. Where are you at? And this leveled check-in lets them point to level 1. I know what book I'm using. I need to start my one-pager. A kid can point to a level 4 that says, I've completed all 5 main sections of one-pager with images and text-specific, information. And after each kid has told me where they are, I'll write their name down on a private list, and now I have a list of my L1s through my L4s. That's a mini private conversation, but it's honestly not really even a conversation. It's just a point and shoot. I'm here. I know I'm somewhere. I know I've participated in this activity somehow. And then, next slide, once students are released to work, I call back my L4s and I say, awesome, you have completed all of your one-pager. And what I have for you is I'm gonna have you add explanations of all your aspects of your project on the back. There's still something for them to do. And then I'll call back the L1s and say, okay, you have your book. Let's start by making a character map. And I can show them, hey, we all know the Lion King. Let's put Simba in the middle. Let's start by figuring out his character traits. So I'll run a mini lesson with each little level, and we are maybe reteaching or maybe practicing. We are maybe editing in the moment, but everybody is involved in one of those ways of figuring out where they are and lifting to that next level. I have seen students really, should I use the word chill? Really chill about coming back to be meeting with me. I have not noticed anyone outwardly feeling any different about being in either or any of those 4 levels. And I think that calling kids back by their name, saying, I see you, you're here, and we're gonna work on this together, is really powerful because it's nobody left behind there. Everybody, again, is somewhere, and everybody is gonna have a goal today to grow. Yeah. Any insights there, Susie?
Lots of insights, but I want you to have on
Sure. Sure. Grading conferences. This is how we end summative assessments. This is teacher to student with that growth mindset, again, of the same advocation, reflection, revision, and understanding. But after students have finished a summative assessment, let's say it's an essay, they will meet with me while other kids are either still working. Sometimes we're doing a group activity that doesn't need my instruction, but I'll call kids back, say, hey, Sue, come chat with me and bring your final assessment, bring your essay. And we're gonna talk about where Sue is in, where she is on the rubric with her work. Next slide, please. Thank you. Oh, we're gonna change this, not an essay, but reading. In our class, or in all the LA classes, we always jot or analyze our text through writing after we read. So if this rubric is in front of myself and my student Sue, I'll say, Sue, welcome to your grading conference. Let's talk about your reading for midterm 1. Where do you see yourself on this rubric? If Sue says 2, I'll say something like, awesome. I see that your jots have a lot of images. Really great way to show me what you're reading. Do you feel comfortable staying in level 2 for midterm 2, or do you feel like leveling up?
I'd like to level up to the 3, Mr. Slag.
Awesome. So leveling up's great. We have a few choices. You can write about full sentences, maybe what you notice about your character, or what's happening about the plot. Out of those 3 things, what do you think that you want to jot a full sentence about?
I think I can talk about my character and what is happening with my character.
Awesome. I'm gonna write that down, check in with you about your goals in a couple days. So that took less than 60 seconds. I've got a full idea about where Sue is and where she wants to be. And now that I've recorded that down in my notes, later in the week as she's reading, I'll say, hey, don't forget, you're gonna be writing about your character today. And then we've met with each other again to talk about her goal.
So Sue had said, I'm good with 2. I'm good with that for now. How would you respond to that?
I might say something like drawings are awesome. I would say level 2 still means writing that most important word. Feel free to stay in 2, but write one word that best describes that character. And then maybe during the week, if she wrote that word, I would say, hey, make that into a full sentence, because I want to know more about what you think.
So essentially, oh my God, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, validating,
Yes,
right?
yes,
With the
yes.
choice that they want to make, while also like putting
Push
them
a little
up
nudge.
to push, yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Great question.
A warm demander.
Exactly. I love that term.
I think one thing I want to highlight that's important in this work, because this has been over a few years
Oh, yeah.
with our department now, is that idea of teacher as facilitator, facilitating
Yeah.
learning. We've done a lot of work and tons of rehearsal on the thing you're asking about. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought, sorry. Oh, that we're coaching. We call it, Haley and I, we're getting in and getting out, like we're
Yeah.
dropping a tip and then like we're leaving. So, and sometimes our tips stick and sometimes we gotta be right back and then go back. I think that's very important that this, we're not teaching something, we're coaching at this point during that release to independence. We call that leveling up. We have some cool language. We call that leveling up. We call it dropping tips and bouncing so we can get around the room to all subjects.
And with this, let's see, so you said leveling up to level 3. Let me rephrase that. We always encourage revising in ELA, and kids can go back and revise their work for full credit or growth credit, I should say. So if Sue had a job that looked like the level 2 one, the character's name in a drawing, if she wanted to, I would offer the chance, if you want to revise that jot, show me an L3, go for it. And she could say, my character, blah, 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 is nice, and I see this one. I would regrade, because that shows, hey, she put in the effort, she grew, and I would like that to be reflected in the grade book, but also, of course, celebrate that verbally. So students with formative and with summative assessments can always go back and revise, and this conference just gives them that bug in their ear. Because they hear this all the time, hey, do your best work, and you can always redo it. But giving them that, hey, we talked, and you have a specific goal. Hey, you can actually level up in the next 30 minutes when this conference is done. That's great. And kids will often come back and say, hey, this is L3 now, can you regrade? And that is, again, the best feeling that kids have recognized where they are. They understand where they are, and they can make that choice to grow. But honestly, our kids all want to grow.
Yeah.
So the majority of kids come back with a revision 1 level higher, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, because this gives them the capable mindset that they can do 1 level in a day. It's not get from 1 to 4, which they can do, but it's that 1 step at a time that really is that positive bug in their ear.
And this jotting process, we all do, and it's now reached departments, we've done work with math, science on jotting, but over time, we've seen scholars really level up their thinking and their writing about reading, and this is just another example of us building that muscle with students and really building that habit of when you read, you think about what you're reading and you write it down. So this is another great example of a real world connection too, of like, we all revise our thinking, right? And great readers revise their thinking. So what Haley's design and this habit of jotting just leans into that in such a beautiful way. Like, of course you can go back and add, because that's what readers and writers do. We're always doing that, revising your thinking. So this has been a really high leverage practice in language arts and across the content areas that show up there. Thanks.
All right, and last slide here. Here's just one more example of a grading conference. We don't always have, let's call this interactive grading conferences. Sometimes it's just teacher and student talking, notebook in front of them. But here, I actually had them use a Google form, and they would click all of the things they've been doing in their jobs. Yes, they've been drawing. Yes, they write down the important word. Yes, they have characters' names. And this still leaves room for growth. For that first line, let's see, I want to try jotting down writing about setting. The question was, what do you want to try next? It's midterm 2. And then the second question was, how can your teacher help you? And this kid said, Ms. Dursley can support me in my jobs by asking me questions about setting to get me writing. Cool, now I have something to check in with this kid as reading is going. You know, if they're having a tough day, say, hey, you and I set this goal about setting, how's that going? It's a conversation starter between us. So this just gives me so much data as their teacher to say, here's where you've succeeded, here's what our goals are, this came from you. I asked you to talk about it, but all of this was how you recognize yourself and the goals that you are setting. So it gets them to celebrate holding themselves accountable, because they know, yes, I made that goal. And yes, I need to hold myself accountable, because my teacher is also expecting that as well.
So this has really reimagined grading at Showalter. You know, we sit here and have a conversation about what is grading. It is feedback. It is feedback to scholars. So this vehicle of how we're doing it at Showalter, isn't that what we want? Scholars to know where they are at and how they can grow. And I wanna invite everyone to come watch it when they can.
Yeah, of course.
But it's so powerful just to hear students reflecting on their learning, but awareness of where they're at versus like, here's your grade, right? So whenever we talk about grading, we have worked with other departments on this. Math teachers want to know what's up, right? So again, science teachers, so we're really, when we have something that we know is really working for our scholars, we're back to how we're using time. We are looking at that across content areas. But I think when I'm working with teachers, I'm always like, well, what is grading really, right? And who is that for? It's for our students and it's feedback for them.
When you look back at the walkthrough process that we've been doing. And I think Sue mentioned it earlier about deprivatizing our practice. What our walkthrough, we were doing some walkthroughs last year. That's what we built off of that for this year. And what that was able to do was allow like science teachers to observe what Haley was doing in her classroom. And they borrowed some of those strategies and some of that common language, and brought those into their classroom. Math teachers looking at how I can use small group time and grading conferences, right, and with my students in the classroom, and just, I think one, it shares those common practices amongst us as a staff that makes us do a better job for our students, but also it helps us with common language and common practice that allows the students to really understand and be able to function in all these different settings, right? And so when we work together as a whole staff with these strategies, I think it just supports our students across the board.
So in summary, Mike, I have the last word here. I want to say a few words in summary that really pull this all together. That's going on at Showalter, like what's going on over there? We have alignment. We have a framework. We have a great recipe for professional development, which collaboration amongst colleagues is embedded. And what we have, this is the number one thing, is we have a focus on instruction. We talk about teaching now, and we are beyond doing it in little pockets. We are making it part of who we are and what we do, and every time we're together, we're just building that system. But I hope that is what was communicated to everyone today, that's really what we're talking about. We can do all the professional development we want, but what works is talking about the teaching, collaborating about the teaching, trying something, monitoring that, coming back, trying again. So all of these things we shared today, we just want to communicate that we believe we are seeing growth because we're rethinking things and we are talking about our teaching and we are very focused on instruction and what is best for every scholar, regardless if you are MLL, scholar with IEP,
Dual cert.
and right? We're all general education students, right? But we really appreciate the opportunity to highlight and share, what is happening in our building. Is very exciting, and we are in November, so can't wait to be talking in June and tell you what happened all year. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I just say thank you so much? It makes me sort of, so this is the first time I've ever had a presentation. I actually have a tear. I have a tear. Because I'm just seeing I am, I'm getting emotional. Because, you know, Brett and I have had so many conversations and he's so dedicated, right? And you have the right team, right, to kind of pull together. We've been talking about UDL and talking about growth and talking about MTSS and talking about instruction, and talking about, you know, removing some of the, you know, segregated practices that really haven't been benefiting our kids. And so for me, I'm getting emotional actually, just hearing it all and just seeing it, how you all pulled it together, because that's not easy. All of this is not easy to do, right? It's not easy to do it within a year, within 6 months. It's not easy. You pull in data cycles, PLCs, you put in an MTSS system, inclusion, all of those pieces, and you've done it. And you actually have some data to show that you actually have a promising practice to continue to build upon. So congratulations on all the work you've done as a leader and as a team over the last year, and to be where you are right now. And I'm just excited to see what you're going to continue to do and how it's going to infiltrate into all of the other content areas. So thank you for taking the mission around UDL inclusion and our street data so to heart. That's what this presentation reflects to me, is that all of those pieces that this team said, this is our work, this is what we're going to do. We're going to figure out how to implement it. We're going to get some guidance, but we're going to do it. And you all realize it's about Showalter doing it, right? Your teachers doing it. So thank you so much for doing that. You've modeled for the district what you need to do and how you're doing it in the benefit of kids. So thank you. My heart's just right here. Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask another
Yeah.
one, last question? I am equally enthused about sports as I am about education. And I did track, and so I understand individual progress and your best performance so far and your goals that you set, and they're gonna be different than other athletes at different times during the season. Same thing for educational goals, by the way. But when I look at this, I always wanna know, like, what does excellence look like to me, right? I need models. So if I'm a level 1, do I see examples of what a level 4 is doing? So I understand what you think excellent is at that level while I'm on my way individually. And then similarly, do you show or share with the class what excellence looks like at level 1? So that they understand that that's acceptable societally, that their personal bests are happening here, and not that we all recognize they have setbacks, but for where they are at the time that they have, the muscle that they have in their brain and their learning processes, that is excellence for them, and they're being applauded as well for getting there, even though it's not level 4 yet. Does that happen communally, or is it just all in these one-on-one things and you don't actually know?
I would say it's 100% modeled, one, by the rubrics we show. We show them, hey, this is what a level 1 looks like, and the level 4 here, and they can pinpoint where they are based on that visual model or based on the bulleted points. What I did in class today when I was doing an assignment with students, I said, hey, I'm only on level 2 right now, and that's the one I showed under the dot cam. I did have the level 4 presented once they were working, and I said, hey, if you're already at a 4, here's what it's looking like. But I showed them I'm at a level 2, I'm proud of it, I have more to add, but this is where I am, and I can't wait to show you all. So yeah, I love that you brought that up, because we verbally affirm, visually, and textually affirm that there are lots of different places to be, and that they can grow to the next level from that.
And even if you're level 4, you can appreciate level 2 and level 1, and if they're making.
Yeah. Everyone's
There's team pride in the progress.
Yes.
Okay.
Good analogy too.
Because we think about the makeup of the classroom, I mean, all of our newcomers, if they're in 8th grade, they're in one of those 8th grade classes, right? So they may have been in this country for 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years. And they're gonna be at different levels of language. And so it's helping them to feel good about what they're able to produce at that point, because they're, like I said, they're all at different stages in their development, and you just want to be able to get them to level up and move to that next level. And I think if they can feel good about what they're able to do at any given level, they are going to do.
And they're experiencing growth. And I think that that's the most important thing is that, kind of going back to the track example, as a former athletic director, you know, you've got your time and your personal best. And so if you look at, hey, I meet my PR, then you're experiencing growth. And I think that that's what's most important, and kind of what Language Arts has done is it's infiltrating into our other departments. And so the students are seeing their growth, not only in language arts, but they're also seeing it throughout the building, which is really exciting. And when we do our recognition assemblies, we focus on growth. We don't focus on only, you know, that 5%. We focus on that our students are growing. And it's that growth mindset.
One question in the world of IT, we talk happy path, and that's exactly what you described. But we also know that we have for testing purposes, on a system that may fail, that we're creating, we have to look at when it doesn't go happy path. Do you have people who just fall out, and is there a safety net for them somewhere? They get overwhelmed, maybe?
I'm thinking of our kids who have truancy problems. They come in day 5 of a project. Our kids who are, you know, it's a habit thing, as we were talking about. They're just not motivated. There's something going on in their life. And it's not a perfect recipe, but it's still that conversation. Hey, you're right here. Let's talk about throwing an L2. And you know what? Sometimes you got to send them back to their table just with that conversation. And we can assist them and we can let them know again what they're doing. But yes, there are kids who just circumstantially or for a number of reasons know where they're at and they're gonna stay there because of specific reasons. But I think that conversation is worth it. That they still know I'm here for you and I see where you are and you've also told me where you are. And I'm here to help you lift when you need. And yeah, sometimes it just pauses there.
Yeah, and I think the idea of universal design is intended to be the net that catches it.
Yeah.
Right,
But not necessarily at the same time.
Not sure.
You may have to wait a while until whatever passes and poof, they pop up.
yeah.
So then I actually have to, first of all, I'm really excited about particularly spreading this to everything else. But one question I'm curious about, I asked about doing student growth percentiles at a classroom level, and you said you don't calculate it. You don't calculate it, but you can. It's really easy to do it. And the question I have is, you know, couldn't that be a data point? I mean, because you're trying to implement this in multiple classrooms, and some classrooms may be doing better than others in terms of implementing.
Well, unless you have more, if you have different information than me, in the past, I used to receive student percentile data by student.
Yeah.
But the data that I've received now, like what I'm able to see in like in the state system under query, and I don't get individual student growth percentile data score. I've only been given what you can see on the OSBI report card. So like in the past, what I was able, I'll give you a good example. Years ago, when we were doing student growth percentile, and I was given data by individual student,
Right.
I used homeroom to create a group.
Right.
For students who were in course 2 for Math 180. I had to hand do it.
Yeah.
But I was able, for those 3 sections, I was able to find the median percentile.
Right.
For that group, and I think it was in the 70s for that group. It was when, as a district, we had really high 8th grade scores, and that was even higher. But when I tried to look for individual student growth data from the state, all I was able to get was just the specific building score. And so I don't know if they're providing us individual student growth.
It's interesting because they used to,
but I
have a report that you could send home with the parent or to the parent.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
No, that's really interesting. Yeah, I'd like to find out why they're not doing that anymore.
I think, I know in the past, we used to actually, the other thing too around, and I asked this question of our coach from OCI was for, especially for English language arts, was we had strand data. So when we really wanted to drill down on like what aspects students were doing well, they're not providing us that strand data anymore. Because just the state has gone to a less expensive package of data, and that doesn't include that breakdown anymore. So I don't know if it's the same thing, because they've reduced their fiscal impact, they're not getting as deep of data.
It's interesting because of course they have the individual student SGBs, they have to, because you can't calculate it.
Yeah.
So you're just saying they aren't giving it to us.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So we do have our iReady data. right?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
It's actually make their growth rules from that.
Yeah.
And we have had kids, like in math, the kids are meeting with the teacher and setting their iReady goals and that sort of thing. The tricky thing in between the student growth in the SBA and in literacy and the iReady is the iReady is the reading, it doesn't include the writing piece. So it's not as much of a core.
The other thing is, gets super technical, but the student growth percentiles are normative growth, and iReady is doing criterion growth, which, yeah, a little different, but still good. I mean, I think they're both good solid growth data. Okay, that's interesting. The other question I had was, if, and this kind of speculation, because I've been trying to advocate for this for a while, is, if we had the money to do co-teaching in every single classroom, what difference do you think could that make a big difference for us?
Yeah, I think it would help a lot.
Okay, that's kind of, I mean, I applaud you for doing, as much co-teaching as you can with the money that we have, which it sounds like a perfect use of it, but.
Yeah, I mean, especially around like the ML model.
Yeah.
When we look at more than half of our students are identified as ML students.
Right.
And they're sitting in all those classrooms.
Yep.
And, Constantine and I have talked about the need for all of our teachers really being at that level there where they have that level of endorsement.
Yeah.
Right, and there are things in the mix to work on that, but at the end of the day, if we can build our capacity so that every time a kid is sitting in a classroom, in a content area classroom, that they have those language scaffolds.
Right.
And that their language development is being supported along with their learning and content. That's how we make that growth. But like I said, we have so much money and we're gonna do the most we can with it.
Sure, yeah.
And if we get more, that's great. But and we have to start somewhere, and I think if we start with these 3 teachers and we move to the next grade level and group each time, and we just continue to build, and maybe we do get some additional funding. You never know, and then we can increase the number.
Yeah, that's why I keep working. Okay, thanks.
So what was,
Can I add a little on teaching? All right. Ready? Co-teaching is such a gift. I teach 2 classes with Ms. Ramos, and so our kids, some of them are served by IEP, some of them are just general education only. But having a co-teacher means we can run small groups. I can be teaching a whole lesson, and Ms. Ramos can take our kids in the over to the table and the carpets and run a small group to reteach or to teach into something maybe for some language learning skills. Small groups are an amazing gift. Even teaching half and half the class, really amazing gift. And these grading conferences are amazing. They're wonderful, but they take time. So having 2 teachers able to run grading conferences means we can do them faster, get our data in, and then make our revisions faster as well. And we all know that our class sizes are, they're large. We've got some big numbers over at Showalter and everywhere in the district. And so it is, while I love the practice of grading conferences, it takes time to get that data down, and then takes time to implement what we've learned from that data. So having co-teachers for the small groups and for those grading conferences really does support our universal design program.
I mean, the beauty of co-teaching also is that essentially half your class size without any more building space.
Right.
It's
wonderful.
pretty phenomenal.
But it does take a lot of time
It
and
does.
collaboration and planning to get able to do that effectively too.
But if you get that culture in your building, that that's the way business is done. I mean, I keep going, Media Prep has done that for years and they, you know, and I talked to other districts that have done co-teaching and it's, yeah, it can be bumpy. I mean, figuring out how to work together and all that, but in the end, if you get through all that, it's great for students.
Yeah, it takes a lot of professional development
Yeah, yeah,
prior to.
yeah.
Just kind of two quick thoughts. One about the grading conferences. You know, you mentioned just that how powerful those can be. And I think, you know, as we were talking about our anti-racist goals, obviously, there's always gonna be room for bias, right? Because we're just humans and it's inherent in our brains, right? There's always gonna be room for that, even with that model, but that is such a beautiful example of equitable grading practices, right? And then the other thing is related to the data. You know, obviously, we lean so much on, you know, state testing data to get some of this information, but it sounds like you're gathering all different types of data points. And I wonder if there's a way that we could, you know, in some of our presentations or something, be able to see some of that data that will actually, I think, represent growth in a more, I think, a little bit more of a meaningful way than just the data that comes as a result of those state tests. So I don't know what that would look like, but and not to add anything else to what you're already doing, right? But you're gathering it, you're inputting it somewhere. So what would it look like to turn that into something that then you could see?
I think that data is totally manageable. We look at Skyward, we see our kids in term 1 who graded themselves at a 2. How many of them in term 2 are still at a 2? How many are at a 3? Because things like our jotting conferences, that formula stays the same, it's repetitive. So that would be actually a very easy data point
That'd be great.
to gather.
Because then you could also probably have within that, you know, some, okay, yeah, I know that, yeah, they were at a 2, they stayed at a 2, they chose to stay at a 2. We know that maybe there was something happening, right? That impacted them not wanting to, right? So that also could give us some of the street data that is combined with the, you know, assessment piece. Cool, thank you.
You kind of alluded to it, because it's a quick question, so, you said over half the students are learning through the program that we're talking about today, is that right?
Well, all the students in 8th grade are part of what's going on
Okay.
with them, what we've done with language arts. But I said this so far as students who have been identified as language learners, it's over half of our students at Showalter are either, we've got, let's see, what did I say last time was 308. And that were, and last time I looked in elementary, 308 were identified as language learners and had another 50 that were monitored, which meant they just recently exited, so we're still following them, just trying to support them. So it's a huge portion of our student body that are identified as active language learners. And so being able to support them across all those content areas is really challenging. We've got about 70 kids that have been here for less than a year. So those kids are all getting a separate ELD section that's focusing on those language skills. But on top of that, they're also still in the ELA classes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I would like to invite everybody to grading or level check-ins on Friday in ELA. We'll be running them for our summative assessment. So if you want to, let's see, everything but second period at Showalter will be running the same level check-in. So feel free to stop by Friday.
What's a good time?
8:30 to 2:30, except for, what is second period?
9:30 to.
Thank you.
10:20.
Yeah.
And lunchtime, 10:31. But mostly all day, mostly all day.
So the acceptors don't come by from 9:30 to when?
10:50.
Yeah, 10:20.
And
then
then
lunch.
12:10 to 12:40. Yeah, I would love to see y'all there. It's really a cool thing to experience.
Unless you want to help out with lunches, we're all.
I've done that before. I'm gonna say this. I tried to do a student advisory training during lunchtime. That was a I think
If she came on a day where there was a different schedule.
I was like, whoa. This isn't gonna work, we need to rethink our strategy. But I got to talk to a lot of kids, that was fun.
Excited to see you.
All right, are there any other questions for the Showalter team?
Excellent.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna move on to the strategic plan. So, I brought it up here as an agenda item because I wanted to make sure there's a lot of conversation at the last board meeting, for the discussion. There's a lot of conversation at the last board meeting, and I just wanted to make sure that, we continued that discussion today because I am gonna bring it to a vote, for the next board meeting. So I wanna make sure we took all of the feedback as much as we could, not all of it, but most of it. We incorporated the feedback into the plan. This is the plan, we didn't give you the colored version because it's a draft, but the colored version is on your board docs and your board agenda. So just to say, I just thought I'd give people, if you have time to look through it. I'll sit here and take notes in conversation or things that, you think are positive, and then also I'll just share a couple things. And so I did a big presentation last time with PowerPoint, so I'm not gonna do that today. This is literally just the document itself. And because we wanna make sure, one, as our school improvement plans, what we heard Showalter say is alignment. So a lot of the work last year we did was aligning the work, right? So aligning the school improvement plans at the school level to the district plan. We did a lot of work last year, making sure everything's connected, everything's aligned. Our OSSI coach has a copy of our district plan. So whatever we update, we have to make sure that that alignment continues. And if we finalize something, we need to make sure and go back and meet with our teams to make sure that while they're doing the final edits, they are working on implementing the changes, if there's any changes that are needed or any additions. The other thing is we learned some things last year, just to remind everybody, we learned some things. So one thing I learned was, because where we were on some of our racial equity goals, right? Last year's goal was all about compliance. Now we're working towards action and accountability, right? So that's a big change, right, for us. We went from having a compliance goal and having everyone attend everything, which actually we worked on, and I don't think we got 100%, but I think we got pretty close. We got, I think, Aaron, what did we get, 95% or 98%, something like that? But we realized it has to be actions or action oriented and strategies and all of that. And then you'll see, I sent into the board for a vote also coming up is the new revised policy, the revised alignment plan, the revised procedures for those racial equity work. So just to show that if this is truly a continuous improvement document, and it says 25 to 28, just to your point, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to revisit this next year because we need to make changes based on the data. So when we have data that says that we're improving on these areas, if we're not, we have to change strategies. And so the reason why I got super excited is it was nice to hear Showalter implementing all the goals that we set in place last year around UDL, around street data, around professional development and learning, around and that's why I got and we've had a lot of messages around the district around growth, centering on growth. I think I've talked about it a lot in lots of sessions and weekly updates and in all kickoffs. And it's the focus has to be on growth and not necessarily on, because the performance indicators will happen if we focus on pushing kids to continue to be their best selves in reading, writing, math, and identity and all their work. So we learned some things last year. We looked at data. We showed the data, some of the data in the fall. We looked at data. And we have to acknowledge too that we had a lot of new kids last year. We were inundated with, I think, close to 300 new kids, all just learning English for the first time, which really impacted a lot. And I want to thank the district and the staff and the schools for just taking it on. But like as Brett said, for example, newcomers still have to take the math SBA. And guess what? That reflects we went down. I'll just be honest, in every grade level in mathematics on the state performance, we went down at every level. So that is an indication of a situation that happened. But we also have the iReady data that shows that many of those kids grew a lot from the time they came of the year. So that's not just one piece of data, it's the reality, and we'll continue to work through some of those issues, but it's a reason why we have a district-wide focus on mathematics, because we need to make sure that if our students aren't able to show, because a lot of our students, actually, even some of our newcomers are strong in math. And if they aren't able to show through language, through their language, because language is a barrier for them, then that's what we have to do too. So, it's our collective responsibility to figure out from the learning, okay, we learned, we analyzed, okay, now what do we do next? And how do we shift that work?
Well,
So-
in math, our growth, student growth percentile actually went up last year.
Yep. mhm.
So again,
Yep,
growth.
right. But what I'm saying is performance-wise, it's not aligned, but our growth was high, but our state standard assessment.
Well, efficiency is down, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's my point. We went up in this area and we have this, but we still need to focus in, because I think we just want to continue to improve our practice, right? So.
Yeah, which is what growth and,
Which is what growth is about.
yeah,
And I think if we focus on growth, the proficiency will follow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And and actually the students will, what are showing us, exactly when we look at what happened in 8th grade and even the high school, if the kids stay with us a long time, they do achieve, and they do enter, they do take AP, and they do all of these things. So we just have to wrap around them as much as we can, especially in the earlier grades, to get them where they are. Anyway, so having all this learning from last year, we've shifted this, so I'm gonna stop talking. I'd like people to take a look at the document for a few minutes and review it. And then anything that people wanna add or change or give us edits now, because I'm gonna work on that and then get that presented to all of us so that we can have our final document for the year to move forward for next year.
So I just probably have 4 quick comments that I read it. One, the last time I think I talked about other documents, goals, board goals, your goals, the strategic plan, and when things appear, if in one document they appear in a certain order, it'd be nice if they were the same, appearing in the same kind of order in this document, so that when I look for one, I can just go right down to this. I have it, you do have it. I think you were gonna look into that, perhaps you did, and it's already good, and we're sound. But if I were to look at other documents that set the framework for this year, I would want it to be kind of showing up in an order that's recognizable, right? I wouldn't want to find the anti-racist goals in another document in a different order than we have them here.
Oh, that's what you're saying. Yeah, not all of that's the same.
It's just formatting, I get it, but I just, so you can just compare apples and apples across the line.
Yeah.
The second large is the unknown unknowns. I'm not familiar enough to know if other documents have things that aren't in here. And I don't mind if they're not in here, I just want to know why.
Okay.
Does that make sense? You only pick, you only handle so much in a strategic plan.
Yeah, the strategic plan goal, I think we had a lot of goals last year. We still have them. For example, when we look at the, for example, instead of breaking it down, we still have the goal for ELA, math and science in here. We added that in there based on feedback from last time. But we have a targeted goal because what we're showing over and over again, and that was based on the problem of practice. So we made that change a little bit because of the fact that it's our Hispanic, Latino and Black students that continually are not achieving to the level. So we're taking a targeted approach to raise the bar, skills as we're learning so that we can focus on them. We also, this is an alignment to some of our post-secondary success goals in our Horizon grant as well. So we're trying to make sure everything's aligned in that. Like they said, we're focusing on growth with everybody, but we're trying to target that because we need to figure out and work really systemically on what's not happening there. And we do know bias is part of that, right? We do know there's, but we also understand too. So for example, if we have data that shows that truancy is an indicator, right? Then we have our attendance, right? If we have data that shows that it's, for example, our Black students that also have IEPs, right? We need to be able to target. So that's an area that then Andrew would have to look at and see if that, but at the school level, so this is not to say that this is what each school might be focusing on, this is what the district's saying, when we look collectively at the whole district, this is our big problem of practice, this is what we're saying, showing as glaring as the groups that are really suffering and not doing as well in our system. And the school improvement plan does the same thing, right? So the school improvement plan focuses on what their targeted group, for one group, it might be African-American students, but it might be African-American males, for example, or it might be students with IEPs, or it might be Latinos with IEPs, right? So then they'll drill down, we're taking a big drill down, and then they're gonna take a drill down on their, so it might be completely matched, but the goal will be the same, so they're gonna be focusing on
working toward.
the ELA. And we're honing in on the interim progress monitoring of iReady because it is one growth assessment. But as you see, schools are the ones that are taking it down and drilling it really down to the classroom level, to the learning
So
loss.
it does.
Yeah, and I will share one other thing is they invited us to come do the learning walks. I think that's great, or come to the check-ins, the level of days. But we also are creating learning walk opportunities for you as well. So that way you can go into a classroom and visit a school and see some of the alignment work. So we're trying to make sure it's aligned, but we don't want to have 20 goals. If, like, we've talked about this, even with our budget priorities, we have 25 goals.
It's too much.
It's too much. So
So
we're trying to get it streamed down.
I'll admit about what's missing, it's just like, have a reason for the priority and
Yeah.
why the others aren't
Yeah.
priority, that's all. So I don't care if it's just a sentence or two that this explains at the very end, something. And then, the last parts are cursory statements, one, I'm pleased that this version doesn't have like blank spaces for numbers that, so you've definitely done your homework and filled in, on targets and things like that.
Yeah,
It's just a thing, there's a counter between the communications piece and then what I think is professional writing. We are acronym heavy here,
yeah,
and it'd be okay with me if there were just some footnotes,
yeah.
what it is, or,
That's a good point.
except for that first page.
That's so funny because I told Brent when he came, before he came here, I said, no acronyms. And
Yeah,
I just produced you an acronym.
That's okay.
You should
It's
scroll
okay.
that up.
Yeah, everything should be
Fine.
spelled
I think a
perfect.
footnote, I get every time. it's great.
except the opening page, the spheres kind of thing, right?
Yes,
And that might be a footnote, all the rest I would want it spelled out, and then you can put the parentheses and rock and roll with the.
or a glossary sheet or something.
And
Yeah,
that would be fine too, and that would, probably ease itself towards, I think, a comment Dave made last time, which he wanted a dumbed down version that parents could read. But I'm striving to get it downable right now.
yeah, the one pagers in the back, we created a one pager in the
Yeah.
back, yeah.
I have a follow-up question on your previous point.
Hmm.
You said, to have like a sentence or two at the bottom about things that we're not prioritizing and why.
You don't have to list them out and say out of 25 goals that we hope to incorporate, this is the first 5 and we prioritize them because. Because it makes the most sense to do them before the others, because the teachers got together and thought they had the greatest importance and deliverables to the students, because the board had it in theirs first.
Yeah, I
Whatever,
guess-
whatever the thinking is behind what.
Is your understanding that this isn't reflective of all the goals that we have from the district level?
Correct.
Are there more goals from a district level than what's here?
No, these are actually what we
Yes,
have
these
more,
are the goals that we're.
we have them more spread out. We have them more spread out. There was higher goals, right? But, so what happened was, for example, I'll say like, for example, equity and empathy, right? We had a goal there specifically on, attending, so for example, so we met the goal. And we also felt it wasn't an appropriate goal anymore because we felt it was a really base, like actually below. It wasn't a strong goal for us. We felt we needed to reach higher.
Okay.
So we eliminated that goal and now we decided to embed the 6 goal areas. For example, the 6 anti-racist work goal, the 6 anti-racist goals. Which are actually now being embedded more forcefully in our plan. So what we did is because they wrote anti-racist discipline, so now we have a beefed up discipline goal aligned to that,
Okay.
right, based on that. So basically,
Bogging the document down. with all
yeah,
If you just want to do a briefing with the board, so we know what happened.
Sure,
I'm
sure,
okay with that.
sure.
I
So
just
you want
want it-
more-
I don't want it lost.
but you wanna make sure it's captured, like the process and for each goal area, what was eliminated, what was combined, that type of
It's
work.
informing, so then we can track what either got crossed off the list, because
Sure.
we've done it, or it got
Okay.
crossed off because it's not a real good goal, or it got crossed off because we can't get to it this year.
Yeah.
But it's in the queue, then we can at least track what happened. We call it traceability.
Sure.
Just
I
where
will-
did everything go? And that could be a separate sheet that's not this.
I think that actually is a good point, and I wonder what sort of like mechanism we could have, whether it's another Google sheet or something, right, that actually like. Because obviously you come and report progress at board meetings.
Yeah.
But then where could we really see that historical over time, right? 5 years ago, here were the goals that we at Tukwila School District had. If we still have the same goals, something's wrong, right? And if we moved away from different goals, as hopefully we should, why? Yeah, so I think that'd be a
Being
great.
burdensome process.
mechanism,
Like a
yeah.
cheat sheet and we
Something
get
that's
briefed
easy.
and we're good because we
Yeah.
saw it and we
Okay.
understand. I realize you're probably 2 regular meetings away from needing the approval, right? You
No,
need-
that's okay. We can make sure, I can make
I
sure.
want the ball and chain going on to make sure.
No, what I will do is I will,
Because that's more a mechanism for tracking progress, past and current.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a part of the strategic plan
No.
document.
To steal from the earlier presentation, advocacy, I know where I am.
yeah, okay. And I almost brought a presentation in. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, one last thing I wanted to say before I go, coming from a student perspective, I think the anti-racist goals like really stick out to me as a Black woman. In past districts, this is my first year in Tukwila School District, and I noticed that you guys put a lot of effort into what goes on the classrooms and especially with non-English speaking communities, in our schools. And I noticed that my last district, no shade, but I noticed that they didn't put as much effort into that, and I felt really behind, and I felt underappreciated, in my community, so I really appreciate what goes on behind it, so just.
Can you say who you are, who you are, and what you represent? I mean, you don't have to, but if you want to.
My name is Paul Swilly. I'm a freshman at Foster High School. I'm an ASD.
And they're also on the student advisory committee.
I knew you were on the group somewhere.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you for
And
sharing.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the learning from last year too, when we developed our anti-racist, so we spent a lot of time working through our equity leads and pushing in the work and pushing in the work, and what rose from that is, okay, we need, we learned from this, we needed to take a look, but I'm happy to come back and show, I have the old PowerPoint, I can bring it back and we'll at least show over time, because even when I came here, I'll be honest, when I was hired, I looked at the draft Word document of the strategic plan, and I had her laughing, because I said,
It's all over the map.
can I, work on this a little bit? I go, because I feel like this doesn't reflect what you guys really wanna do. And, yeah, but I can share sort of the history of everything that kind of happened, like over the last, at least even the last 2 to 3 years from what I've seen. And I will also share, like who's been involved, because to be honest, prior to the last 2 years, and I don't know what happened before that, 10 years ago or 7 years ago, but when I was actually here in 2014, they had a consultant outside from another state, California, coming in and redoing this for a year. I think you were part of that committee that did and the previous year before that, is they had 2 other groups actually supporting and drafting documents for Tukwila with, by the way, lots of money, by the way. And we haven't done that. We've decided, no, we're not going to use an outside person. We're gonna use our Tukwila School District staff, our principals, and our students and our equity leads will help, all of this work, and we're gonna draft recommendations based on, and we had a huge survey that went out, so we're gonna do this based on what the community says should be our goals. And then last year, when we developed it, I'll be honest, like, we had data to show that, also show the evolution, we had data to show that we should have been more targeted. We had the data last year, but because our focus was on alignment, we kept the goals pretty high level, like for example, all 3rd grade students, all 7, even though I had the data that showed, because we needed to really hone in on the foundation.
Yeah.
So last year was about really building foundation and making sure our schools were aligned to the foundation. And now that we've cemented, and we heard evidence that we've cemented some foundation, now that we have foundation, how do we get more strategic? Because, so now this iteration is about being strategic. Because even with the foundation building, we had some student groups that were really, were underperforming in some areas. It came up every time we had a work session, it was coming up in special ed, it was coming up in highly capable, it came up here, and it was the same two groups all the time, which is why we decided, okay, if we're really truly gonna be equity focused, then we need to shift our goals a little bit. So I'm giving a little bit of synopsis of that, but I'll try to pull it out and share some long-term thinking about the work. And I think if the board disagrees and they wanna go back to that, the old way of doing things, they need to tell me, right? So that we.
I'd be surprised, but.
Yeah,
as we say-
but I'm just saying
As
too.
we, as we
Thank
say,
you.
as we say in rugby, look where you are. You
Yeah.
have to have that to know where you are.
And also, we will learn again this year, like based on, if we learn that this is really working for ELA. And I will actually say too, I'm curious, so it happened in 8th grade. So what happens in 6th and 7th grade, right? And then I'm thinking, how do we build this in our 5th grade? Like, all of that.
Because what happens if those Showalter students who've been experiencing that type of
Yeah,
flexibility and choice and autonomy in their learning, they
Yeah.
go to foster where that's not accessible to them?
yeah.
Or they end up in a setting where that is a little bit more rigid, and they're like, well, but I learned that this works better for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, like how we.
Hopefully they'll start adopting those habits on their own.
Yeah.
like a little guy.
Exactly.
This, you know,
It's whether they're able to transfer those into a new classroom,
Yeah.
if the setting isn't as open
again,
for them
yeah.
using those different
Hopefully
methods.
set expectations a
Yeah.
little bit.
So what I will do, I'll commit to doing is bringing this document back for action, but also, Deb, I'm gonna bring a presentation to kind of show the history of at least the strategic plan over the last 2 to 3 years and give some evidence into what's
Yeah.
happened in the past.
Hopefully it's good for you, because then you have that to look back.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, just.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say two thoughts. One, I mentioned you right before the meeting about, I do feel like just based on the place that we are in right now, I do feel strongly we need to have some goal in our strategic plan about financial health, sustainability, whatever that looks like. Not sure where it fit, leave you to figure that out. But there needs to be something in there around that. And then I'm just curious around the 6 anti-racist goals so we lay them out here, and then are those embedded into the metrics below? Is that the intention, or do we have separate metrics that we're gonna use to determine how we're doing on those 6 anti-racist goals?
So all of the goals for the school improvement plans are written SMART goals to SMARTY goals, which means the goals should have an inclusionary equity focused in the goals themselves. And their data that they collect should be reflective of their SMARTY goal. Even ours is a SMARTY goal. We call it targeted universalism, but the fact that you have a targeted, race-based goal is basically a SMARTY goal in essence. So we shifted how we do the goal. So every principal has been trained, thank you, Scott, on how do you write a SMARTY goal, how do you look at data, how do you analyze the data, how do you use equity analysis in their data, but so their goal, the school improvement goals should be written as SMARTY goals for inclusion and equity in them. So we've changed how we do our goal setting, we've changed how we're looking at our data metrics, and so it should be embedded. We're working on embedding the anti-racist pieces in there, but if it's not showing up, then we need to hold ourselves accountable to that.
Yeah.
But like, for example, the ones that could easily be showing up right there, like the anti-racist discipline, leadership development, student voice and engagement. So those are pieces that you should be seeing evidence through some of the strategic plan goals.
Maybe we can talk through a few,
Yeah.
this would be today, but I think some of them maybe could be stronger.
Yeah. Don't give me the feedback. This is it. Email me if you have feedback on all of this. We can change the language. We can change it to make it stronger.
So, on page 10,
Mhm.
the first metric there is a, proficiency goal, in light of, what we've been talking about, why don't we make that a growth goal?
Yep.
Using SGP and, I was actually looking at, where we are as a district in comparison to like the 6 and, you know, the other districts around us in the roadmap project, and the one, we're actually doing pretty well. The only district that's doing better than us on growth is Renton. And we're doing the same as Federal Way, we're doing better than Kent Highline and Auburn, so, you know, we could easily, have a goal to start, you know, to get up to 50, for example. Because we're at 48 on ELA and 47 on math, so now science, there is no growth goal in science, so you have to be science, you know,
Yeah.
using the proficiency goal, that would be fine. So that's suggestion
Okay.
one.
So a growth goal instead of a proficiency goal.
Yeah,
Okay,
and,
I'm all for it.
the second one, interim progress monitor, that's a really kind of, I mean, there's no real goal in there, it's just use iReady. I think we can have some actual, you know,
Okay,
numericals around, I mean, because, well, if you look at, you know, if you look at shoulders, they've got, you know, some specific goals, so it seems like we could do that. And then also keeping with the growth goals, if you go, oops. Oh, they're all page down on this.
oh, yeah. We need to remember this.
We need to get the numbers right.
The cancellation can,
Oh, I always at the right place.
Just give us the top.
yeah.
Equity and empathy.
Equity and equity, student high expectation goals. So under metrics for the MLL, you have a proficiency goal in WIDA. WIDA has some very good progress goals, and we should use progress goals.
Okay,
Because we're at, right now, I think district-wide, we're at like 33% of our students are progressing. And the nice thing about the WIDA progress goals is it's criterion-based, so it's how fast you get out of that. And I think the state is currently, statewide, it's at 37 or something, so we should be able to get, you know, at
Above
least to
that.
that level and above that level, something like that. So,
okay. All right, and, okay, I have that. Anything else?
My only thoughts are you have a 25 to 28.
Yeah.
Kind of plan, we're gonna revisit this every year, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of look at this as the report card of how our district is doing, and so I want to see if every year, at least a time, a meeting, that the presentation is where are we at our goals? What, are we making headway, are we not? And then it can be kind of a living document
Yeah.
as it keeps going.
Right,
So we need to have a set time and a measure of how it's gonna be, so that we can see how we're doing. And I guess, think about it strategically, so if we have to course correct, we're not doing it at the end of the year, we can do it, you know what I mean, just, or how that's gonna look to be best, so it works well, and then we can keep a measure.
perfect timing, so we revamp all the work sessions moving forward, starting in January, where actual data and progress will be sent to you in real time. So January, February's budget, March, April, I think May, is it May too? And it goes, anyway, every month they are coming to present at a work session, teaching and learning our progress on where we are, the current data where we are right now. And so that we did it later, because in the beginning we did it earlier and we didn't have the data to present. So the work sessions moving forward will be the data, our report card on one of the goal areas at that time. So that's the plan.
So the plan will be, we're gonna take one of the goal areas, you'll present it, and then we'll see what we asked, because I don't have a measure here, and you're gonna do that, where we are.
Yeah.
And then, so that we can look at where
Yeah.
we can.
So for example, we won't have, for example, when they do the ESPA, we won't have the proficiency goal, the proficiency goal, because that happens at the end of the year. But they can definitely present where we are on the iReady goals and the other goals that we have, like the mid-year goals. When we do the February presentation or March presentation, we will have the discipline data, we will have all of that, so we can do a mid-year sort of check on where we are.
I think what makes that process hard is that the state reporting systems are so far behind, right? And so that's why, like, I feel like the more that we can figure out ways to assess today where our students are, and then next week where our students are, that doesn't rely on the state reporting systems or these assessments, I think we would be able to get more of that real-time data. How we do that, I don't know. But there's gotta be a way, right? And even if it's using some more of the, data like they're getting at Showalter, kind of more of that school specific, but, I think that's really gonna be the only way that we can really monitor how we're doing before the end of the year. Because again, even with like, I read data that they take in the spring, we don't get into the fall. So we can't even make concrete goals about the future school year until 2 months into it because of when that data comes. So there's, I think some of our work needs to also be, how do we get some other mechanisms that give us real quality data in a little bit more of a real time
Well,
way?
there's no reason we can't get iReady data in June. We don't need to wait. I mean, the fact that, I don't know why we're getting it, but we get it in June because we got it.
Yeah.
So we get it 3 times a year. The other question to follow up on the formatting. So this document right now is kind of, it's all over the place about, here's what it was, last year, here's next year. I mean, sometimes, for some goals, it's kind of written in the text and some it's not there at all.
Okay, but you want more consistency.
Just consistent, yeah, so it's easy to
Okay.
read, here's
Consistency,
what it
yeah.
was last year, here's what it is this year, boom,
Yeah.
we made it, we didn't make it,
Yeah.
discuss.
Okay, great. Consistency on data, data pieces. This is why I brought it here. All right, any other thing else?
I just want to say, I spend, in my career, most of my time, 95% of the product, the piece is okay.
Mhm.
And I just fixate on the things that are wrong, I just want to get it to acceptable for the customer.
Yeah.
So even though we're kind of picking our way through.
Oh, I don't
there's a
want
lot
to
of
pick
good lights here.
No, this is about transparency.
Yeah.
This is about making sure we are being honest about where we are as a system, where we need to improve, and also pushing that conversation, also pushing me too, because I'll be honest, like, I should have caught the goal proficiency thing, right? Focusing, I've been saying and preaching growth, and then, of course, I'm trained in a system that kind of defaults, right? So even I need to be challenged and supported in ways to kind of go, okay, yeah, I missed that, I need to, because that's how I'm ingrained. Like when I went to principal school and superintendent school, you get ingrained in one way of doing things, right? And so, and also you rely on the systems you have, like that's OSPI system, and so that's a default always for me as a person, but not that I love it, because I don't. But I have to be challenged on my biases, because I am institutionally biased because of how I've been trained, so.
So I am just trying to say, there's a lot good in this document.
Oh, yeah, and I think so too, and so I take the feedback, just as feedback, that we're gonna take it and move it to the next level, and it's gonna be. And it still won't be perfect, when I present it to you again in November, it's because it's a continuous improvement document, so that's the point, yeah. All right, so with that, if there's nothing left on this topic, I'm gonna move to the next one, which is on retention. So, in front of you, I actually sent, 2 articles, and I'm doing this in a fashion to sort of explain our process because of where we are. So listed here on the memo is one, the policy. So we have a policy, a student promotion retention policy. And you have access to the policy, which by the way, got changed last year. So it got updated last year. We decided that it was really important and critical to make sure our policy was changed, especially in light of, COVID and in light of a lot of things and research and all of the pieces. And so we updated this policy last year that the board approved last year. So this was approved and updated last year. But the next step for us is to align procedures and to align our procedures and the way we're doing work. And so that's our next phase. One of my goals is this year is really to align procedures with policy and making sure they're aligned to actually the work we're actually doing, and not necessarily some high aspirational thing, but making sure that it's actually what we're doing. So you have a copy of the procedure, you have, the policy, you have a copy of also, in front of you here, an article, and I love this article. It says, what does research say about grade retention? A few key studies to know, and I love it because it came out of Education Week. So it's just 2 years old, so it's not too old, and it's a 4-minute read, but it kind of highlights, it's kind of balanced. It does the pros and cons about retention, because it's not, I think that's important, right? Because we know some cases where retention has been good, some good for kids and families, and in some cases it hasn't, right? And it also gives a big perspective. It does address race and bias in retention policy. So I think it was a nice little balance. It's a simple article to read, so you can read that on your own. But what I'm gonna do is focus on process, because I think that's the critical piece for us, is to talk about, so what is the process for Tukwila School District, and then we'll answer questions at the end. So moving forward, I'm just gonna go ahead and just, we have our vision mission, which I always like to put up there, but I'm not gonna, I highlight that, we'll go straight to the next piece, Deb. Yep, and here are our goals. And our anti-racist goals, which actually should be part of the work we do in terms of making sure we don't use bias in our promotion or retention processes. And I will say, in many, many districts, there is a bias, right? And when we look at data over time, and I'm just gonna name it, that white students and Asian students are more likely to be promoted, and Black and brown students are most likely to be retained. And that is the data that there is, which is why it's super critical that we have a really important process that actually mitigates for that. And also a process that makes sure that families are involved, right? So it doesn't feel like something's being done to a child, but family voice matters and student voice matters in some of these things. This is the last paragraph that I highlighted, and it says retention or acceleration decisions will only be made after a collaborative process between the school staff and the students' parents, guardians. The superintendent will establish procedures to specify a timeline for discussion. So this is what we're here to talk about. And I just want to share a story because I think it's important to know this story. It's not here in this district, so I'm going to preface that. But I remember I had a friend call me. They were a dean in a school, and they called me because they were desperate to support this one student who they knew was doing really well. And there was some teachers that were wanting to retain a student. It was an 8th grader going to high school. And I remember this case very well. It wasn't anything at all. So they were going to start a process to retain the student. It was based on the fact that the student wasn't attending in class, wasn't speaking up, wasn't doing anything, wasn't filling out assignments, right? All of the stuff that was happening. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna, because I had access to all the data, so I'm gonna check out and see what's going on with this, get just from a different view. And they were starting this process, and I'll tell you, they actually did it, and I'll just say that we had to reverse it, and this is why. But when I dug a little deeper, I said, I haven't learned about this kid. And it was also hard because the principal was somebody I worked with in the past that I really liked. So I was like, what's going on here? So what happened was I learned that the student was Native American, and the student had been in several foster homes before they were finally living with their grandma and being, you know, and having struggles, which probably could attend to why they were not performing or not answering questions, or maybe there was cultural reasons, you know, or relationship reasons. There could be so many reasons. But this is the part that everyone missed. On his data, on all his stuff about performance data, level 4, level 4, level 4, level 4. And I'm sitting here going, they're retaining a kid who's achieving at the highest level in the classroom based on, so there was a disconnect, right? So who wasn't looking at the whole profile of the kid? And then I had to email everyone at the school level and go, whoa, 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 then take another look, invite the grandma, like find out what's going on with this kid. Because obviously, or maybe this child was overlooked for highly capable, or overlooked for advanced learning, or overlooked. So here's an example of, and I don't have the answers. All I did was I looked at a bigger profile of the kid and went, whoa, 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 there's a big disconnect at the school level on this child. And somehow somebody didn't look deep enough, or I don't know what happened, or was
That's
just.
not really that deep.
Yeah, it wasn't that deep, but that was what was crazy to me, and I'm being very polite when I say I was a little frustrated too at the school level. And so having some of these experiences, and I've also been a mom who has sat there in a room with people, and they didn't know my kid. And they were making suggestions for self-contained, because my son had an IEP, or they were making suggestions based on like one little incident or one thing. And I, as a parent, would be like, are you kidding me right now? And so, because I happen to have two children, one who has dyslexia and one who has autism, right? So I have plenty of meetings, not all the time, but every once in a while I'd be sitting in a room going, you're not looking deep enough or understanding my kid enough to make these decisions. You know what I mean? And so I'm gonna challenge on that, by the way. And both my kids are in college right now. I mean, I'm just saying, like, come on. So, sometimes things get missed. So we need to make sure we have a really strong product. I just share those stories, not here in Tukwila, but I'm just saying that these things do happen, and it's important that we look at the whole child and everything that's happening with that child before we make critical decisions. Next slide, please. And then this is, so I actually remembered the non-acronym.
Thank you.
And this is a very simple version. There's lots of fancy ways of talking about, but one of the goals that we have as a system is to be a multi-tiered school system of support, which means that when we look at students and we look at their data and we look at students individually, that we're making sure that no matter what, the majority of the students are getting, all students are getting general education exposure and curriculum. That wasn't happening before. It was not. And it is happening more and more now. We had to eliminate some non-credited MLL classes. We had to move students into, we had a lot of students in the high school and middle school that were getting non-credited specialized classes for whatever reason. We still have intervention programs, so what we're trying to do is say, no, all students should be getting content, and grade level content, as exposed to grade level content. It's our job to figure out if they need like scaffolding, as you heard, if they need adjustments, if they need different type of reading materials, if they need a reader, if they need a paraeducator to support them in a small group. Like, it's our job to figure out what that system of support looks like. And then the next, but of course, when we look at data, we have kids that are falling behind, right? So the tier 2 is, and she gave a beautiful example of that, is when kids are performing below, then you pull them aside and you reteach and you read, so they, actually, it's perfect. It seems like we planned this, right? But we didn't. But they gave a really good example of when you do the assessments in real time and not wait to the end, exactly what Director Simpson said, don't wait till the end. But in real time, then you can pull them in for small group instructions, for targeted interventions. And then tier 3 is students who really need, some students need more. They just need more, and they actually need a quieter classroom, or they need a more, but not all day. Like we're saying, it depends on the content, it depends on the area, it depends on the discipline. Some kids do need more time than others, some need less. But there are intensive services as well, which is why we have and some intervention time is needed, because some of our kids do need it. So just sharing that this is the way it should be, and what we need to make sure, because sometimes I've seen it in some places where they flip the triangle, where we're intervening, meaning with 90% of the kids, just because they happen to have a label of this or that or the other. And what we're saying is no, flip the triangle back, and we need to make sure that we have a system. And so that's why they do co-teaching, right? So so the kid's still getting the content, but with the MLL support in the classroom, or they're still getting the content, but they're getting the special ed support in the classroom and the services in the classroom. So we're flipping the triangle in Tukwila School District, and that's the system we're actually striving to do. And I love it because you can pull down evidence of what they shared happening. It is there, they flip the triangle, right? So,
I think the key to that targeted classroom intervention, that is not about pulling them out of the classroom
No.
and putting them in some other room.
no, yeah.
It was stigma, oh, okay, all you kids go over here and,
And that's
not that.
Well, that's what she said, they do it in the classroom, like, so, and I'm gonna say, we still have room to grow, like, you can't just do all of this in 1 year in all of our schools, but the reason why I got emotional is because you actually saw evidence of, like, that's the school that's one of my schools where I've been working with, and I'm thinking, our high school's doing it too, more co-teaching, more of this, and so we're trying to do that. I know in elementary school, they're flipping it as well, they're working on that, so I think, but it's not perfect, like, this is year 1. We still have work to go, and the teaching and learning team they're devising PD around some of this work to make sure that we are all one system, to make sure we wrap around schools in the work as they need help and support too. So this is our goal, is to be MTSS, so I'm gonna say the acronym, but it's MTSS, it's multi-tiered school system of
And I
support.
wonder, I'm just, that word intervention around here has gotten to be really convoluted
Yeah.
and, you know, to me, it was about first switching back to what we did at one point, which was a coaching model and
Yeah.
not an intervention model. So I'm wondering if that word should be banned from.
Yeah, maybe, well, we say classroom embedded interventions
something
or
like
something like that.
Right.
But I will say some of the kids still do require, they just do, some of our kids do require
Yeah,
some, you know, if they have a serious discipline issue,
sure.
or if they have sensory issues, we do need, it's a balance, right? We can reword that and figure that out, but we've actually, I'll just be honest, in our reorganizing around our budget, right? That's how we reorganized our budget and priorities, is around making sure that we align how what we funded in alignment with what our goals are. And that's just, I'm just gonna name that, and it's true. We were very strategic in how we did our positions this year. And we made sure that we were in alignment with our goals. So that's,
We have, I mean, do we still have, I mean, in some of the job titles, we used to have job titles, interventionists.
we don't
Is
have,
that still there? Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, should we be really
We're,
calling them that? Because they used to be, I mean, we used to have coaches and then several superintendents ago,
Yeah.
all the coaches got fired and then we had interventionists.
Now we
And then
have-
that model moved, so there was more kids being pulled out.
we're moving towards,
I know,
yeah.
yeah. Go
MTSS
back to this.
coaches, yeah. So we
Yeah.
have MTSS coaches, and MTSS coaches
Okay.
are that role, what we're moving towards.
Okay.
I think didn't we hire 4 of them this year, or 5 of them?
at elementary, 3.
3, and so that's the model, we
Yeah.
hired 3 so that's the model we're moving towards, is
Yeah.
MTSS coaches.
So just to give you that, the job titles should probably reflect what we're trying to do.
Yeah, well, and we will continue
Yeah,
to do
okay.
that. So we still have, you have to remember, we still have more, we're not out of binding conditions yet.
No.
So we're still working.
Sure.
So, yeah, but that's part of the plan, is making sure that everything we do in our budget, in our finance, is in line to our goals around instruction. And that's the bottom line, and our goals around how we want our schools to function, and our goals around what we believe about kids. Okay, next slide. Please, thank you. And then I just gave a definition here of what an MTSS framework is, with more just information, and it's basically what I explained, right? So tier 1 is universal instruction or core instruction that is provided to all students. Tier 2 is targeted support, such as a small group interventions for
Or
students.
small group instruction.
Or small group instruction.
They were using them, they
Yeah.
they didn't use that word
Yeah,
intervention.
yeah, so you're right, so I'll change that, this is what I said, hold me accountable
Yeah.
for students who are struggling with tier 1 instruction. And then intensive individualized intervention for students who need more support, and again, that doesn't have to be in a segregated area. And it doesn't have to be aside from the classroom all the time, it can be in your classroom, so just sharing that, so.
Question back on your, if you take that wording back to your little
Yeah,
triangle.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't wanna overdo it, but
That's okay.
intensive individual services.
Yeah.
Maybe,
mhm.
or instructional.
Yeah, we can line that up.
Instead of services, instruction,
Mhm.
whatever the wording is on the second page.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, and next slide, please. And then, so this is what I want to talk about, is procedures, and this is actually, we have care team language, I will also add in our CBA with our union labor leaders. So we have care teams, so care teams in our schools is a process where we embed within MTSS for students. It's a purpose is to make sure that we meet and review and address the needs of students who are not making expected process in their learning or their well-being. And that the team collaborates to ensure each student is supported. So it's a way that a teacher and a team of teachers and staff can actually come together in a multidisciplinary fashion to kind of problem solve. What do we do to support this child? Now, sometimes the teacher does that in their own classroom, and they can figure out supports and services and things like that within their day. But sometimes if there's more situation that's coming up more frequently and the teacher's feeling like they're going through their toolkit and they're like, or they're a novice teacher, there could be so many reasons, or maybe they're still really struggling with MLL services and understanding like a specific support or a special education student, or maybe one of the disabilities in particular that they're just really wanting to learn more about and get some more ideas. And then that's when they would be referred to a care team process. And sometimes people refer them because they want to actually make sure that we're monitoring maybe a student for various reasons. It's supposed to be student-centered, making sure that it's always with the student's interest in mind. It should be collaborative decision-making, and that family input should be involved in that process. Parents should not be surprised like, let's say, for example, before, let's say a student might have a mild disability, but it's being managed in the classroom well, and then something happens later on where maybe they go up to 6th or 7th grade and the disability is really showing up and it's really struggling, right? There's a process after a care team where a child might be referred for special education services. No parent should go to that meeting not having had previous discussions about some of the things that they've tried before. Like, no parent should be surprised at a meeting, a first meeting, when they're talking about special education consideration, unless the parent initiated it, right? But no parent should be surprised when they come to a meeting for a referral and go, wait a minute, why is my child being referred for special education, evaluation? I don't get it. That should not happen. Anyway, so that's the goal, is that we have family input, and then staff are also part of that, right? And so, and I'll just say, sometimes even in some situations, like sometimes the child that the child really relates to might be the PE teacher, or it might be the librarian, or it might be somebody else. And so if somebody notices that this kid does really well in this classroom, but not here, why aren't we figuring out what needs to be done here? And then there should be a continuous improvement process. It's cyclical in nature, and that we're making sure that we're trying different things, we're trying different maybe tools, we're trying something along the way, and that we're always thinking about the kid, and always thinking about the student's best interests and how we're supporting the student. Sometimes it's just a matter of a student might need a tool that maybe the school doesn't have access to, and then the team can help figure out how to work with the district so that we can fund a tool. For example, if a student is very wiggly, right, they might need a wiggle cushion or something like that to help them regulate in the classroom. It could be we find out the kid couldn't see, needed glasses, right? It's something as simple as that. But sometimes it's more complex than that too. So just to share, this is the process for care teams.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, so I've been asking for years, I'm interested in this process that's been going on for a number of years. Are there any patterns that are coming out of this process? Because those can have, budgetary implications. If we see a certain thing coming up over and over, you referenced, a tool or something that somebody needs. I'd really love to hear what any patterns come out of this. And
yeah, I think to that point too, like, I think this is some of the most information I've gotten about care teams since I've been on the board, and I know you've been asking a lot, like, to hear more information about the care teams and what they do. So I think even like, just to add something else to our long list of things that we'd like information about, but yeah, again, and it could be embedded into something else as well.
Yeah.
But like, what are the trends that we're seeing? What are, some things that,
So I'm gonna actually then pass this on, not for you to actually talk about it, but as a future presentation, maybe address some trends that you're noticing through the care team process and things like that in the future, because I know you're doing a special ed presentation in the future, so maybe you can address that.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I make one comment now?
Sure.
The only current visible trend in looking at over the course of like the last couple of years from what we've seen and just input from staff is that currently and historically, the care team has been a process or a pathway to get a student to qualify for special education. So we really want to focus on a re-education around that. This is not a pathway to special education services. This is a pathway to identify what are the barriers of learning and what are the instructional things that need to happen, putting together a plan prior to that so that the outcome isn't always special education. And so there can be different outcomes for that, but definitely, I think that's a good question and something that we can definitely dive into a little
that would
bit.
be horribly wrong if this was a
Yeah.
path, especially. I never even thought that, I thought the special education was like a separate process over on the side that like the psychologists and so forth run, and, but maybe we need that's another area where I'd like to understand, because we've never had, in all the years I've been on, we've never had a psychologist ever come in and tell us what they do.
By the way, it's School Psychologist Week. Happy School Psychologist Week. Happy.
A quick comment on the whole way through, I just get to be the newbie. I had no idea what a care team was. And when I read this, I still had no idea what a care team was because it doesn't say who's on the care team.
Yeah, but we're gonna get to that. It's coming.
Okay.
It's coming. It's all coming. It's coming. I'm getting there.
Tell us at the end.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking where it says, what is the care team process, right before you just say, who is on the care team?
So how about this? I'll flip it then. So go, Carly, and then, yeah,
Gotcha.
go with your question.
So I'm curious, particularly since student voice and input is a primary like goal of ours. How and where does student voice show up in the decision making, even around their own retention or acceleration?
That would be a good question to figure out how to incorporate that. I think though, it depends on the developmental age, right? I know, like, for example, a lot of students are involved, usually can be involved in fourth grade on up to high school and experience that.
Particularly I feel like, so reading that article, and thanks for sharing that, by the way, I think obviously there's so many different factors to consider, right? We're thinking about accelerating or retaining a young person, and I think a big thing is the social emotional component of, right?
Yeah.
And that is, I think, where the student would actually have the most ability to speak for themselves about what is going to be the best choice for them, right? So we can look at it from the academic lens and as much from the whole child as possible, but now without the child. So I would even say, like, there's also got to be a way to at least gauge even those youngest of students. What is gonna be in their best interest, like, here's like a wild example, let's say that a young person has been bullied all year, right? And so that impacts their performance, their ability to show up and all these things. Retaining them, in their opinion, could actually help because they would be in a totally separate space from the person or the people that are bullying them, right? So there could be ways, obviously that wouldn't be the best thing, but like, if we think about the social emotional well-being of a child, they're gonna be able to speak to that the best. So I do think it's something that should be considered and baked into the process somewhere.
Yeah, and I also think, and we have to lay out too, though, like the family, this is the school side of the house. So just go to the next slide, Deb, go to 10 first. Let me go through who's there, and then we'll go through like the data pieces. So the composition, each school has one, and they have administrator, representative, interventionist, specialists, the MTSS coaches, so forth, teachers, whether it's general education, special education, or other specialists who really know the
So you
student.
just took that, and put it near the front, so they know what the
Okay.
care team is.
Okay,
Not that whole page, just the,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, and I
I think it's
think,
talking about what they all do. and-
yeah, I do think, I just wanna speak to the whole student piece, I think it does depend on the student, because we've had so many kids with anxiety, and I'll be honest, like, I'm just gonna use my one child example. He only accepted his disability this year as a 20. Like, he never accepted his disability his entire life, he couldn't. But now he can, and it's taken us lots of time to explain, like, well, I have a disability, I haven't seen, like, I had to do a lot of talking, and he had to have a class, he now has friends that have disabilities, it took him a long time, so I just think it depends on the student. And their ability to either process like this type of, because it is intimidating, I will say, as a parent, and parents have shared this with us. You have to think about the parent, and our job is to figure out how to make sure parents are feeling safe in those spaces, because we have a lot of families who come from cultures where they don't question the teacher at all, right? And so that's one thing we have to deal with, that's the bias in that. And how to make sure that the parent feels safe, or they even bring somebody with them, right? So they feel safe. So, because we've got like 5 to 6 experts in a room talking about your child. So it's a really delicate thing. And I'm just saying it's something that we have to attend to all the time. Even I, as a sitting principal, in going to a care team meeting like this, felt intimidated in the room, although I got over it pretty
I can
fast.
see why.
But you can be intimidated pretty easily. Anyway, and that's the process, the action planning process is the initial meeting, implementation of what interventions you want to utilize to support, and you need to, this is the most important part, follow up. You need to, in 4 to 6 weeks, assess, how's it going? Is it not going well? What are the strategies? What are we doing? How's it working? And then what you do, going back to the previous slide, this is the data that we use to assess. So data, academic data, behavioral, social, emotional data, attendance, family input, right, about culture and background, and then the student background, making sure that we're looking at the whole child, that we're understanding if they're involved in a CBO activity. Sometimes you can even bring in, you know, an agency, people that work with them like in a tutoring program or after school, or if they're doing sports, what's that like?
Are the liaisons included in here?
They can be, they actually have been invited in there. We're just talking about the core team, actually anyone can be involved in a care team, to be honest, like if I'm the one that's like, the kid wants me there, right, or the family does, I could even be invited into a meeting.
So it could be a family
It
representative.
could be family and parents, and that's the part, is how do we make sure the parents are feeling safe and have equal say, and that their background and the student background and the cultural background are fully represented in those spaces. And then we can look at some of those pieces. So I just wanted to share a little bit about the process, and we'll make sure we create the input on some of these pieces, and then also but let you know that this is the procedure that we really want to outline for folks and build up and utilize. Because it's important that when we don't want to create, do retention if it's going to be detrimental to family or students' cultures. But at the same time, we do need to look at the data over and over again too. Last year was really hard. It was my first time I had to tell there was a student that wasn't going to graduate, right, for whatever reason, and we had to make those decisions, and the school made the calls, and we had to do that. And sometimes the students, they don't get to, right, because of whatever X, Y, and Z. But the point is that we take a critical lens and look at all of the pieces and all of the components in there. So
So is the special education determination, is that a totally separate process on the side? And could, you know, you go down to the care team and maybe sometimes it pushes over into special education? Is that the way it's supposed to work?
Yeah, so an outcome of a care team process after the team has gone through a couple cycles, we wouldn't want it to be a one and done.
Yeah.
Like we want to do like implement this, come back, is it working, make adjustments,
Right.
come back again. But an outcome could be that we think that this student might have additional or greater needs than we can identify and might require specially designed instruction
Right.
versus just the menu of options that can happen within.
So does everybody always, if there's ever a concern about issues, they always start with the care, or can they go immediately over to?
The
special
only
ed?
thing that would circumvent the care team process would be a direct in writing referral from a parent or
Okay.
guardian.
or a doctor,
Or we would want it to come from the parent.
yeah.
So,
Couple of comments on composition of care teams. Probably the first bullet is it's redundant with the title.
Oh, got it. Okay, that's my error.
No, that's okay. Okay. I guess it's just one.
Okay, and then, but basically, I just wanted to go through the process with everybody because it was brought up, you know, in a meeting. So what is our process for retention and promote? And this also applies for promotion too. So if a student needs to be referred, we do have a review, we have an assessment process for promotion, but sometimes if a student comes in, it could be a student comes in, especially from another country, and people are like, whoa, like this kid needs more challenge, right? And so they would go through a process like this too as well. And then also just to share as also additionally that what we don't want to happen, because I will say this one thing Ticola does really, really well, I think here is that one of the things they do well here, and I would say that we do well, they've been doing this historically well for a long time, is they do recognize that many of the MLL students that are coming in from other countries have a gap in learning. And I will say my experience in other places is some people consider a gap in learning like a disability, and it's not. And so that's what I would say is done pretty well here, is that people understand that there's a gap in learning, that there may be 1 or 2 year gap because of trauma, because of, so that is something I think that people try, especially with our MLO students, really assess, like, it's bigger than that. Now, I will say the delicate part is when you have a child that is both MLL, McKinney-Vento, and possibly have a disability. That is a really challenging situation, but I think we do have some tools and our community liaisons and our families, and there's also several assessments that you can use to discern that and separate that out. And but that's more delicate when a child has impacted by many, many things and that they're really struggling. So it's hard to figure out, is it this, is it this, is it this? And it's complicated. But I think that the experts in our district and our building have lots of experience with that. And so I think they are actually really much better than most districts in discerning out some of those pieces. So I just wanted to call that out as a positive that we have in our system, because we have so much experience that we can oftentimes tease that out and make sure that we're making good decisions based on that.
So by and large, our students that we retain doing really much better because we did.
I believe, I would say we retain, I think every year, I don't have the exact data, we can get the data for you. I know that there is retentions that happen every year. There's 1 or 2 retentions that happen. We do monitor them very closely. Because I think it's important that you do monitor that. You want to make sure that it's landing, right, at the families and the students and everyone's on board. Sometimes students are put into a wrong grade level because when they come into our country, so we have to sometimes course correct for that, or sometimes we decide it's best to leave them right where they are, especially if they were placed in a younger grade, because ages when they come in sometimes aren't not want to say accurate, but aren't the same data keeping that we have. So sometimes you'll have some of that.
Do we have any classrooms that are, I think a few, but that have multiple grades in the same classroom? How many would you say?
There's
I mean, multi,
3 splits in the elementary schools, 1 in each school. There's a K1 and a 3-4 and a 3-4. So that's where we would traditionally not see that, or less often. And then high school, there's definitely many classes that are electives that have multi-grade.
So I know, this presentation came about because I know I had some curiosities around, kind of continuing to look at those scores reports, and we talk so much about students that are just grade levels behind, and then you just see the pattern of getting further and further and further behind from the proficiency of where they're supposed to be. And even if we're looking at growth and prioritizing growth as a district, proficiency to some degree is also still important, right? And so I think I just want, I can hold the nuance of it all, 100%. And I also wonder, what shifts could we make as a system that could catch young people that really maybe aren't ready for whatever reason to accelerate to the next grade, but yet we don't want to retain them either. So having more classrooms that have those blended grades, right? So let's say you have a 4th grader who maybe isn't ready to accelerate to 5th grade, but they can be in a 4th and 5th grade classroom that way. And then the next year, maybe they could move into 6th grade, right? So they're able to skip that 5th grade year because of the instruction they've been able to get within that blended classroom. I just wonder if there's an opportunity to think about what a slightly different structure could be to support.
Well, and then just to make it more complicated, you've got multiple periods, different classes in junior high and high school.
Sure.
So if I'm failing in, I don't know, language, but I'm excelling in math and science and everything else, it seems like you keep me moving
In those things.
on the STEM things.
Yes. Yeah.
And pop me into either mixed class or the earlier year to
Yeah.
do language, and just have huge emotional support saying, look, this will bolster you. The only other thing I learned, I'm sorry, I'm a 60s, 70s child, right? Then we moved up from the South. Because of my birthday, I went into college at 17 because they moved me forward. But because of my brother's birthday, he moved back a year. I think it was good for him, but he was actually really, really brilliant and he had to go to alternate school to finish. Because it was the seventies and they were teaching in funny ways back then, and he was building his own crystal radio sets as a 9-year-old, and he was brilliant. I kept looking at him and going, I don't understand why he can't navigate the school system. Cause I'm 2 years younger than him.
School systems are designed for
Well,
people that think that.
That's exactly right, and his problem was he just wasn't a compliancy
Yeah.
agent. He was a really good individual thinker. He owns his own business. He's an electrician today and does trade shows, right? And he's brilliant. And he managed to find his slice, which was to identify a project that was of his interest and he went through. But I know that was a stigmatism for him. He did get his GED, he did fine, he went on to college, he did fine. But it had to be hard for him on one hand, but on the other, he got to mature more as a young man as he went through his high school years. And I think that mattered in relationships and a whole lot of things. But, you know, it hurts me that it hurt him. But in other ways, it was the right decision. So when you look at these things, the blends and all those options, and just try to figure out how to shore up their feelings, the alternate school did an excellent job. And those were all new back then.
So like that example you gave too of like, what would it look like if you've got a 9th grader who is, you know, yeah, excelling
My
in
brother.
certain subjects and maybe is more like a 7th grade, you know, math, right? What if they're taking a 7th grade math class? But then they're still in the 9th grade, right? So what would it look like to actually, for it not to be like so black and white or linear? And have more ways for folks to have access to classes that meet their skill level while either keeping them in the grade or moving at a different pace through.
And the one last option is summer school back in the day.
Yeah.
That helps a lot of kids. I know even here, we don't have a lot of money for it. Accelerate them through the summer and kept them back up.
I would say our high school program probably does more of the blended like opportunities with grade levels and more, it's not based on, it's solely on like, I'm a 9th grader here and there, it's based on me. I think that's, and the high school does have a care team process too, just to share that. So when you have that student, for example, who's doing well in the 5 periods and the one they're not, right, and it's become an issue, then you can look at it. It could be based on the reason why it's because they're not there every day, because they're late every first period to class or something. It could be like that's the work that they have to do to figure out. They have it in the middle school too. So I think one is how do we remove stigma, right? That's the big thing. How do you remove stigma around just the whole process of learning? And that's why I kind of appreciate we're trying to push in, because we also have the stigma, and what you alluded to is when you take a bunch of kids who are sort of, let's say they all have a disability, and we put them in this one area all day long, every day, and PE is different, and it's like all of these things. What message are we sending to them? And you know, when you're riding a bus, it doesn't matter who has a disability or not on the bus, you're all riding the bus together, right? So I think we send messages, subliminal messages all the time to kids, but it's not only the kids that are being sent out. We're sending a message to the kids that are still in the room about who needs special this and special that. So the more that we can think of ways to bring kids into the classroom, destigmatize that it's all about the learning, it's all about growth, it's all about pushing ourselves to be our very best. That's the work that we have to do. And so whether it is bringing in more multi-classes or those types of things, but I think this is one process, and I'll just share, it's gone through some iterations and some changes, but we're trying to make it, and I know it's a student-centered process, but we're really trying to align it to our MTSS system because it has to be. If we're truly talking about what we're doing, and we have to also make sure that we align all of our system pieces in there so that we have more kids being successful. We need to monitor, we need to make sure we're monitoring it. Like, that's the question. My question is, how were we Fidelity going back in the follow-up meetings and monitoring success? Or did we just make a bunch of interventions and then check back in 6 months later and go, how did we do, right? And so the critical pieces we're trying to say is like, it's about accountability. So I think what we're trying to figure out is like, how are we accountable to ourselves to make sure that what we say about a kid and their learning, and if we say we're gonna do something, that we actually did it And that we monitor it and that we change course as soon as we can in the moment. And not all interventions have to be through this process. Really embedding and supporting teachers to understand that they too, they know their kids the best. Like they can actually do some things in real time in their classroom every week, every day, every week. So.
The other dynamic that goes on, this is more kind of at the elementary, but if you have a good curriculum, there's this concept of a cyclical curriculum, so if they didn't get it the first time, it'll come back. And it's because we know every pick up the concepts at certain times, and so, we need to make sure that that curriculum is being taught with fidelity to make sure that, so then we pick up students and they struggle the first time to get it, but then the next time they get it, they're gone, and so.
And then we celebrate it. I want to make sure, Director Simpson, I know you had some questions about retention. I want to make sure.
I'm appreciating where everybody's going, but I'm thinking great ideas, but currently, what are we doing now? So looking at what we've seen through this year, there was large percentages of students not passing. So my question is, how many care team meetings are we having? How often are we meeting with the family then? If we have 30 to 40% that are not passing, are you having that many meetings? Are we making the parents aware that their student shouldn't have passed third grade? They're going into fourth grade now. We're gonna be monitoring them. And on top of that, then who's monitoring? But back to your accountability, right? And then whose job is to make sure that that's being followed through? If we have 2,700 students, say 700, I don't know, special ed or whatever, they've got like 2,000. So we're at 30-40% of those students of the 2,000 that should be looked at or at least started this care process. Are we doing that? Is my question, are we having those meetings with the parents and are they aware of your students shouldn't be passing or isn't meeting this requirements? Next year, we're gonna be monitoring it and it could be this type of thing.
Well, there is a requirement in third grade there was a third grade requirement for the state that any child that doesn't pass the third grade proficient test, the SBA, there is a required meeting that has to happen with every third grade family and that they have to be part of the process. So I know that happens in all of our systems for third grade at least. But we can figure out some information around getting some more technical data on care teams.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're really working on this year is alignment to for these processes to be across all schools, because all schools have care teams, all schools are doing these things, and I can't support 5 different plans.
I don't think
So
the
bringing-
care teams can support this many students.
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at what you have right now, that's a full-time job
Yeah.
to go through it. You're talking about hiring somebody to do that.
Well, it's one piece of a greater puzzle that we're working to make sure that our students are making progress. And so the care team is one thing. We have family conferences. That's another pathway that teachers, educators are talking with families about their students' growth and learning. There's all sorts of different family meetings that are happening. This is just when students continue to rise up above some of those other things, then it will trickle to this. But part of it is really the systems of one, accountability. How can we make sure that we're making progress on these things? Because we want to know that. We want to know what's working. And we want to be able to use that across all schools versus we find something that's working really well here and this other school is really struggling with it, with a barrier to learning over here. What's the instructional strategy that this school did that can share with this school team to share across that? So it's definitely a complex. It's not easy.
No,
It's not.
I appreciate that. I'm just trying to find the connect between the 40, in my mind, the 40% of students that are not meeting the grade level every year, right? And then I understand what you're saying is here, but then how are we addressing that? You know what I mean? So that I can understand sitting at this table, we heard today if it was 60% of math, he was better than the state and all that good stuff. And I appreciate that kind of, it's reality, right? But it's not good enough. In my thinking, that's not good enough. 60% of our students passing on grades, not good enough. So how do we up it so that it's not continuing every year, you know, you guys are the professionals to do that, you know, to figure it out. It is a complex problem, I agree, but we can't. What I don't wanna do is, we have things in place that doesn't sound like we're using to the best of what we could be using, and then we're still having every year 40% of students not passing.
So the other dynamic that's going on in this district and has been going on for years is mobility. So I don't know how many students I've known over the years who started in our district, you know, they immigrate from some other country, started in our district, and then their family, you know, moved, finds a better place to live, they move up on, and they're gone. And then we get a new wave of students coming in that are, you know, well below the grade level. So and I've never seen some good numbers about exactly how many there are, but it's one of the reasons, as long as we're kind of a hub for immigration and low income, our proficiency numbers are never gonna be, you know, as high as Mercer Island or whatever. Not gonna happen, just because of the dynamics that's going on there, which is why, you know, I continually like to work on growth rather than proficiency. Now, we need to keep an eye on that, you know, and that could go too far, but I don't know. We have a high mobility and always have had in this district, so, you know, people move out and up, which is great.
Sure, and I can believe, but I can't believe that that's all. I can't believe that's just all mobility. I can't, you know what I mean? I can't buy into that, that's just it. There's more, you know what I mean? There's more.
Well, we can absolutely do better, and we heard today, you know, stuff that if that approach could be implemented across all our schools and all our departments, I can guarantee that we will do better.
And see, and what, going back to that presentation, and I circled it, you know, that I was here and I was thinking about it because I'm already looking at next year's budgetary stuff, and I circled Showalter's budget, the people, the OD and street data, and then how is this co-teaching gonna be protected?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm already trying to think of, all right, this is something successful. Sounds like it's working. We're integrating in there. So how do we protect it? So I think, you know, so part of the whole issue is I like to feel good. That stuff's good. But the way that my thinking is, okay, how do we protect what's working? That's there. We have a budget, you know, that we have to still, you know, deal with. And then make sure that we're still trying to service these kids that are, you know, that are here. So this is what I'm looking for, is just kind of putting the nuggets together and then figure out how that's gonna, as we go through this kind of survival mode, because we're inviting conditions, and then going back to our plan that we had today, right? It has to have the budgetary into our strategic plan, you know, going back to exactly just, and I heard everybody say we need to, but that has to go in there. So we're not back at this, this point again. So I'm just, all of that is kind of what I'm kind of thinking about in my mind, of just looking at that, you know what I mean? And then we have to make wise choices with what we have, right? So, like I said, back to it, circling, Showalter's budget, the people, and making sure the co-teaching. If co-teaching is the answer, I don't know what the answer is, you know? But if that is a high answer, then we need to sit here and think, is that a way we want to move the district towards? You know what I mean? If that's what we're talking about, and how do we do that? And then how do we get our partners, you know, in line with that, the teachers union and everybody else, you know? If that's something that's gonna work, it'd be best for our students that are highly mobile, that we're saying, and that's gonna be, then we need to think about that.
I agree, and the one thing I will say about, first, I'm just go back to your first thought, the earlier question.
Lots of thoughts.
Yeah, sorry. Well, I'm gonna do the first one, and I'm gonna do the last one, and anything else in between. Just because I wanna make sure. The first one is also remembering to, well, back to what Director Larson said, we do have some programmatic situations in our system, a large number, for example, MLL. It's as students, as long as they're growing and they're learning, especially even kids with a disability, for example, students with an IEP, as an example, they have individualized goals that are actually below proficiency, and as long as they're meeting their goals, they are as long as they're meeting that goal, and even if it may be under proficient, as long as they're meeting their goals, that is still a qualifier. But same with MLL. So we have so many students in those categories. It's even, well, you said it's more than 50% of our kids are categorically in some of these things that we have to monitor differently than just proficiency. So I just wanted to state that we have to focus on growth for those students because of the fact that it is it's a different category, it's a different lens, it's a different assessment. It's about language acquisition, it's about meeting their IEP goals. So I just want to state that up there. And so if you're needing more, find out, like, that requires a little bit more digging into, like, looking, we have to do more individualized look at all of those pieces. But we can find out data around the care team process and retention, those types of things. We can get that information to you. In terms of the last statement, yes, I agree. We need to be funding what matters. And we need to stop funding what doesn't matter. And so, we need to stop funding what doesn't work. Right, I'll just add that too, because so we have some practices, and I will say we have a lot of practices that people are hanging on to for whatever reason. It's just what they've always done, it's what they know, it's how they were taught. And our students are really different. Like, I would say another probably big indicator about care team students is probably social emotional, a lot of anxiety, a lot of ADHD, like a lot of stress, a lot of counseling, a lot of therapy, a lot of social emotional needs based on the last 3 to 4 years, and so, and it's gonna get worse, yeah, so I think that is important that we continue, because we still have the needs, right, we still have all those needs here, and I'll just face it, we're a high needs district, and if we're not being funded as we know that, so we have to be a little bit more strategic in how we fund what matters, and, but it always has to be centered around kids, and so, if we're a growth center district, if we're a district centering on that as our major, goal area, then we have to make sure that that's what we're monitoring along the way. So anyway, and I agree, proficiency does matter for the state level compliance and all those pieces, but I think the state understands that for districts like ours, that growth has to be a huge indicator of a measure of our success or not in the system. So I just want to say that I do agree that we need to figure out how to incorporate budget in this process. And we need to address some of these other pieces, and we can find out more technical information to support the questions around care team, that we wanted to make sure that we explain that there is a process. And it's also lots of, I'm sure if I surveyed everybody in Tukwila School District, I would have people in the system that say, absolutely, we do not retain kids. And I will have people in the system that say, absolutely, we do retain kids. And I would say at every level of the system, because it is such a tough topic, because everyone has the one person in their life that actually was impacted negatively from that situation. I have a brother too, who still says to this day, I should have been in this grade, and he still says it to me as a 50-year-old man.
I think to answer maybe one of your, I think you probably brought up the question, how do we know when we're doing well? It's when our growth numbers keep going up. I mean, our proficiency numbers, they may go eventually, they're not gonna be super high as Mercer Island, but if our growth numbers, if we keep improving our growth numbers, then, we're doing really well for our kids, I think.
Okay, well, with that, we have 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure, any other questions? And then I have to go too, so.
Well, these are good. Just a completely off script, question. New Year coming federally speaking, and wondering if we can, I don't know in what meeting or where, have conversations about federal funding we receive, and because of these very goals and strategic plans, which I'm very proud to be a part of. There's a strong possibility, hopefully the state will stand behind us in big ways, but there's a strong possibility we would come under a spotlight.
Yeah,
And I don't want to solve it tonight, I just want, I think we ought to have a conversation.
I know this is not on the agenda, so can I do this like as a point of privilege or something? We just talk about this for just a second. I don't know if this low. Okay, sure, I'm just gonna do it. So thank you for bringing that up. We will certainly have that on an agenda in a future meeting. I think have a more collaborative conversation around. Last Friday, the Friday before the election happened, when I got back, Constance and I met to talk about, what is our strategy, what's our plan, assuming what happened, happened. So our kind of first steps, I think we're definitely in agreement, and I feel pretty certain that everyone at the table would similarly feel strongly that like our responsibility is to our students and to our families, and that's gonna, of course, gonna look it's gonna get more complicated, I think, as we're thinking about funding, particularly knowing the state of our district financially. So what is happening right now is we're actually, Consi is working to convene a special task force that we are working, what are we calling it?
Identity safety.
Identity Safety Task
I
Force.
think I read it in the emails.
Okay,
Sent it to you.
that, the intention of that, of course, is to think about all the different identities that are continuously negatively impacted by our political environment, and specifically really thinking about our newcomer refugee families and our trans and other queer students, because we know that those are two areas that, the incoming administration is very clear about their, intention to target. So that is in the works. I'll definitely be a part of that committee, so we'll have one other board member, hopefully, that will be joining that committee. Of course, it can be anyone. I think what I would hope, is that we have folks at the table who, hold identities that might be, be impacted as well, right? So, so that is something that's happening right now. The intent is to pull that group together as soon as possible, to do some immediate strategy to get any policies that we need before the board to approve, before January. To again restate our commitment to, our anti-racist practices, our gender inclusive policies, just to kind of firm those up. And then, of course, there are some things that we're gonna be shielded from, at least temporarily, because of the state we live in, though I'm not naive in thinking that that stuff is gonna last forever. And so we do have maybe a little bit more time, than some states, but I'm not, again, sitting in the fact that we're immune from things that could happen really quickly. So that's to say, we do need to have some more collective conversation as a board. We're gonna have to probably make some proclamations, right, particularly about state or federal funding, that might be, that will likely be at risk in our, stance around that. We're gonna also be working, of course, with, the state. We do need to push the state, to make sure that, to figure out what their plans are, to also ensure that we are, getting the resources and the support that we need. And I feel really hopeful and grateful that we have the incoming governor that we do, right, who has a history of pushing back on things. So all that to say, it's not lost on us, and something that we're already starting to plan around, and will be an active part of our conversations, over the next 6 months for sure, and well beyond that.
And that's also gonna have implications, there's the budget advisory committee.
Yeah.
If, as we expect, immigration goes down to
Yep.
zero, that's its implications on our budget. So we'll also be talking about that in that committee as well.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just looking at some comments about targeting nonprofits and government groups that
Yep.
are either directly or indirectly in support of, folks who have immigrated. And I find that whole concept tragic, but I can't believe we're not gonna have collateral damage in a lot of ways. So,
We will.
Well, we will be inviting some of the CBOs that support our groups, so it's just not Tukwila School District, we have a lot of partnerships. One example is, also, students with disabilities, for example, with Special Olympics, talking with One America. We have a partnership with Voices for Tomorrow, which is one of our, preschool, they're.
Primarily serves Simone.
So we're making sure that we include a variety of voices that serve our direct community, so that we can be, just really in alignment and hearing from other folks and other perspectives too, because sometimes I want to make sure that we're being balanced and we're listening to all voices, and, we're gonna invite City of Tukwila as well, to be part of.
We should be
We should
partnering
be
together,
partnering together on some
so
of
that
these things.
Tukwila is a safe haven.
So it's not gonna be just
Yeah.
Tukwila School District, it's gonna be more of an entity around us, because many of us do serve and support our students in different ways, and so making sure that we have more of more organizations, more partners, more community involved in some of the plan, because we're not just about policy, we're also talking about direct service and support of families, and we're talking about even advocacy at the state level, so it's three-pronged.
Yeah, and something else that, that Dr. Bridges was gonna do, that sounds like you did a lot in Seattle, back in 2016, is, helping staff and students and families know what their rights are. So there's a Know Your Rights campaign, that we're gonna be bringing in, to WILDA. So of course, like one of the things that I wanna do a little bit more research and understand around is like, what, and we probably don't have much, which is kind of unfortunate, but what opportunities do we have to say, no, our schools are safe and you can't come in here? You know, like if someone's looking for a student, right? So anyway, we're gonna be figuring out, ways to make sure that folks are really, comfortable and confident in knowing, what legal, like, where we can stand really firm and where we.
And also where we should not, right, to be really clear, because if we have a court order, we have to follow the court order. So just making sure staff are prepared, so they understand where the line is, right? Where the line is here and where the line is not.
Yeah,
So, because we don't want to put staff in a tough situation where they're making decisions that are either harmful to them or their children. Or the
I would
families.
agree. Some escalation procedures also with the press would be helpful.
Yeah, no, we'll make sure everyone's aware. I just want to make sure that we're all really clear. Like I said, our job is to make sure we educate our children and our support our families, but we have to make sure that we understand what the lines are too.
Great.
Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so, officially got our opportunity for public comment. There is no one online. So I'm gonna go ahead and assume that there's no one here to offer any public comment. So we'll go ahead and just move to adjourn our meeting.
Thank you.
So moved or just?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
All right. Hey, Aaron, do we have a Forward Children's Foundation meeting on Thursday?
It was last Thursday.
We did like Tuesday